Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen gets sued by her own daughter. Would I be the jerk if I put a lien against my parents' house and sued them for my college tuition? I'm 17 female, am graduating high school next month, and I'm set to attend my first choice college with a partial scholarship in the fall. It's an in-state school about an hour away, and because of my dual enrollment credits, I should only be 5 semesters from finishing my bachelor's degree and then going for the master's degree I need for the career that I want. 5 years ago, my mom's mom, passed away, leaving behind a college fund for me and my siblings, Kyle, who's 25, and Kelsey, who's 22. Mom's Aunt Teresa was supposed to oversee it, but she passed away in 2020, and somehow my parents wound up in charge. I don't know all the details because I was 12 when Mama passed and 14 when Aunt Teresa passed. I'm not even sure exactly how it was structured or how much there was, except that it was supposed to be enough to cover a significant amount of our expenses, if not everything. Kelsey is a fine arts major, and her first year of college was derailed by lockdowns, and she wound up losing an entire year. She was supposed to go back for her final year next fall, just as I'm starting college myself. But last night, at our grandpa's birthday dinner, my dad's dad, she announced that she had been invited to participate in a junior artist in residence study program and was deferring her last year of college. Everyone congratulated her, and my grandparents asked about what sort of stipend she was getting. She said there wasn't one, but Mama's money would cover her living expenses. My uncle said that between me starting college and them covering that, the fund would be empty soon, and asked if her share would be enough to pay for her final year after. That's when my dad said that since I had scholarships and my sister needed it more, I wouldn't be getting any of the money Mama left for us. Everyone was shocked and started asking questions, but my parents insisted that it was important to support my sister's artistic goals the way we never were, and that I'd be fine. When my grandparents argued with them, Mom said I could take out loans for what my scholarship didn't cover and live at home to save money. I was in tears, and my sister was upset that people weren't happy for her. When my uncle asked if there was even going to be money left over for my sister to go back and graduate, my parents said that they would take out a loan against the house to cover it. Everyone got in a huge argument, and my parents and sister left. My grandparents, uncle, and aunt got to talking, and my uncle, who's a lawyer, says that he's going to look into it and that we may have to sue them for my share of the college money because he believes they mismanaged it. My grandparents are worried about them mortgaging the house and losing it, and suggested we take out a lien against the house for my tuition money so they can't use it to get a loan to pay for my sister's expenses. Would I be the jerk if I sued my parents for my college tuition and put a lien against their house like my grandparents suggested? This sounds like they horribly mismanaged the money. A fund that was supposed to cover like 50% of 3 college tuitions should have had a healthy 6-figure amount. Not to mention, the fund was supposed to be used for tuition, not other programs. During the discovery, your uncle may find out some disturbing truths, but secrets, especially money secrets, always are the worst. Whether you do or don't, your relationship with your parents and sister is likely irreparably damaged. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. If your parents are refusing to give you the money that was left in the trust for you, you're 100% in the right to try and get it. They're essentially stealing from you. Leasing company sealed living squirrels in my walls. What do I do? I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I put a maintenance ticket back in January to have holes sealed up at the edge of my roof where squirrels had gotten in, and I could hear them chewing at the wood in the walls on a regular basis. Month after month, I would contact the leasing company for my house any way I could to ask when this was going to be resolved. Yesterday, they finally came out with a crane and did this metal work and expanding foam job, cutting down my little library to reach it. I thank them for finally relieving me from the sounds of squirrels chewing apart the insides of the house that I'm living in. Unfortunately, about 2 hours later, I hear the same chewing sounds I've heard for months, but this time it was obvious that the squirrels were trapped inside my house and trying to get out. I've created multiple maintenance tickets of high importance, both yesterday and today, being listed as an emergency. I tried calling their office and I got a voicemail, and after hours, I tried calling them and selected that I had an emergency maintenance request, but each time it rings a few times and then automatically hangs up on me. I try to leave a voicemail and it just says their voicemail box is full. I don't know what to do. I can't get a hold of anyone at the leasing company. The roof is 3 stories up and those squirrels have probably 18 hours max before they pass of dehydration, at which point my heart will break and I'll have multiple animals rotting in my walls. Like a horror novel, I can hear them just scratching and chewing, trying to get out of what must have been their home for months. What do I do? Who do I contact? My current only plan is to get up as early as possible and drive to their headquarters and hope that someone will actually be there. Sometimes there's just no one at the office in the middle of the week. Call animal control? I contacted animal control and they let me know that unfortunately they aren't allowed to destroy property without permission of the homeowner, which is not me. Really wonderful lady. She expressed her sympathy for my situation. The only thing I can do at this point is to go to their office first thing in the morning and drive a resolution. Fire department? They unfortunately aren't willing to damage the house I'm in, as I'm not the official homeowner. I told them about the leasing company inadvertently sealing them in. Man up and climb up there, you despicable coward. If you're what it means to be a man, I don't want to be one. Let me just go to Home Depot at 12:30 in the morning and get a ladder, you inconsiderate jerk. Have a heart. In a nicer way, get a ladder. Because I don't own the property, and because it's 3.5 stories up, and because it's almost 1 in the morning, I'm going to do the best I can in the morning to make this happen. But hearing this BS from some jerk doesn't help anything. I feel awful and there's nothing I can do right now. I'm going to bed and I'm going to get up early so I can get this resolved. Update 3 days later. The squirrels have all been freed. After hearing about my dilemma, my sister and her partner, both strong animal lovers with animal rescue experience, drove all the way down from their area to help give me a hand with this situation. While on their way down, they talked me into going ahead with rescue efforts, and I made a few holes in the wall to try to tap into the squirrels' pathways. I turned off all of my lights and closed up all of my windows except for one, which I pulled out the screen so that any squirrel coming out of the wall would see their way out. Within half an hour, I heard a squirrel come closer and I saw him pop his head out. Holding perfectly still, I started recording as the abrupt guest checked out my room and eventually found the open window and escaped. While it was looking around, a second squirrel had popped its head out, but this squirrel was much more wary of me. He checked things out, but jumped back into the wall when I moved my head, thinking a squirrel was actually coming in from the outside across the room. The second squirrel made another appearance a bit later, drank some of the water I had left out, looked me right in the eyes for about 1.5 minutes, and then he noped right back into the wall. It was around this time I set up a little web camera I had fashioned out of an old cell phone, so I could keep an eye on things without needing to be in the room. The squirrels must have decided to go to sleep, which was around the time my sister and her partner arrived with pizza. During the night, I had a travel mug jammed into the wall, so I didn't wake up to a squirrel on my face. However, starting at 2 a.m., and every few hours after, I would hear the squirrel start plinking away at the bottom of the travel mug. At 6 a.m., when it was light outside, I opened up the window closest to the hole and pulled out the travel mug. 5 minutes later, squirrel number 2 jumped out through my window to freedom. I was ecstatic, until I realized I could still hear a bit of scratching at the other end of the house. Apparently, a third squirrel was trapped over there. With my sister's advice, our crew ended up duct taping a hammer to the end of a broom handle, Tears of the Kingdom style, and her partner was able to pry open a section of the roof enough for the third squirrel to get out by leaning out of the third-story window. An unbelievable and insane 48 hours. Am I the jerk for refusing to take my nephew's girlfriend out for pizza? I, 35 female, invited my nephew, who's 18, and his girlfriend, who's 21, over for dinner tonight. I do this with my niece and nephew and their significant others every few months, just because it's a good way to catch up on things. I like to cook, and they enjoy home-cooked meals without having to lift a finger or do dishes. Young people with full-time jobs, I get that they don't cook every night. My nephew has a new girlfriend, and I invited her along, since she is an extremely picky eater. And since she's an extremely picky eater, I've asked her beforehand what she liked to eat, and catered a full meal to her liking with her food preferences. I spent the whole day doing groceries and cooking today, as it's my only day off from work. And like I said, I enjoy cooking, so I don't mind this at all. And I also invited my mother so she can see her grandson, and I always make way too much anyways. I had just finished everything in prep work that I could when my nephew calls, and I can tell that he's sort of awkward in calling. I ask him what's up, and he very carefully asks me if it's okay that we just go out for pizza instead tonight. I explained to him I'd rather not, since I've been cooking all day, and it'll just go to waste. And he explains to me that his girlfriend only likes the foods she told me she liked when they come from a fast food place, and she's worried she won't like it, so she'd rather either not come at all or go out for pizza. Implied that I'm paying for all of the pizza as well. I can tell he's sorry for the drama, but I inform him that I'm just not gonna budge on this, and I won't be springing for pizza when I've been cooking all day, and that she doesn't have to come. I'll just see him and his mom. But she would prefer him staying home as well if I won't cater to her needs. And since the car is in her name, I would have to go pick him up, which is half an hour back and forth for me at this point, and not ideal. At this point, I was annoyed and told her she was kind of being disrespectful and entitled, and he said he agreed, but just couldn't deal with the drama of her right now. I told my mom this, and she said that it's financially no problem for me to spring for the pizzas, and I could just portion out the food and put it in the freezer, and it's about all of us being together and not about what we actually eat, and that I was being a jerk for not accommodating my guest. So, am I the jerk? Update. I ended up following the advice given here and texted my nephew that if he still wanted to come by himself, I'd spring for an Uber for him. He basically just texted me a bunch of hearts back, so he also loved the idea. I also ended up telling my mom the dinner was off. That way I could have some alone time with him. He's also my godson and we're very close. He said girlfriend wasn't happy he was leaving her for the night, but apparently he had told her to buzz off because he was over her drama. We had a great dinner together, the two of us, and he talked a lot about his doubts in his relationship and is considering breaking up with her, not just over this, but many other things as well. It ended up being a really fun evening, just the two of us, and I sent him home with a big batch of Auntie's special brown butter cookies. Just yummy special, before you all ask. So, thanks for the great advice. I wouldn't pay for pizza. Instead, I would pay for an Uber for your nephew to come to your meal. She sounds awful, and he's on the fence anyway. He just needs a push. Get him away from her influence for an evening and give him a nice long rundown of what his life will look like if he stays with her. Not the jerk. Tell your nephew that girlfriend is welcome to buy herself a pizza to eat while the rest of you eat the dinner you made. That's a fair compromise as it shifts the cost of the pizza to her. If that isn't workable, then offer to pay for an Uber for him to come by himself. Am I the jerk for telling the teachers that my daughter's bully being a foster kid isn't an excuse to be a brat? I'm 36, female. My daughter, who's 11, has a close-knit group of 5 best friends with whom she does everything together. At her school, students have to sit in the same seat for every single lesson, and my daughter and her best friends all sit together at one table. There's another girl in my daughter's class called Winnie. Once, Winnie came to sit at my daughter's table when one of her friends was off sick. That day, Winnie constantly knocked my daughter's books and pens off the table on accident, and borrowed her stationery only to snap one of her rubbers, stain her highlighter with black ink, and was even found with my daughter's pens in her pocket. One morning, Winnie came to school crying nonstop. The teacher was very sympathetic and asked if there was anything she could do to help. Winnie said she wanted my daughter removed from her seat so she could have it, and the teacher agreed. The only empty seats left were all the way in the back corner of the classroom opposite her friends, and the only students sitting there were a girl who was known to be a delinquent and 2 older boys who had been held back. The teacher refused to give my daughter a real explanation for why she had to move seats, instead saying some generic stuff about being kind to those less fortunate. My daughter cried for a week straight. In our country, the school year ends in December, so that's over 7 months of being isolated from her closest friends. She's also starting high school next year and will be attending a private school, while her friends are going to a public school, so this is the last time she can hang out with them every day. A few days ago, I was called into the school because my daughter had gotten into an argument with Winnie. Winnie had confided in my daughter's friends about how she had gone into foster care because of her parents' issues. Winnie was always a loner at school and wanted some girls to sit with during this time, and the teacher sympathized with her, so she agreed. The only reason my daughter had to move was because there wasn't enough space for 7 girls, and my daughter was simply the one Winnie liked the least, and she admitted to lying to the teacher about being uncomfortable around my daughter to get her moved. When my daughter found this out, she told Winnie she didn't understand why she had to pay the price just because Winnie's parents were a bunch of criminals who didn't want her anymore. I know Winnie's had a hard time, but so has my daughter. Her older brother passed only months ago. I told the teacher that Winnie isn't the only kid going through a tough time, and I didn't understand why my daughter had to be punished for another girl's struggles, as if she wasn't struggling herself. The teacher wanted me to make my daughter apologize for her remarks, and I said it was their fault for punishing her and forcing her to sit with the problem kids despite doing nothing wrong, and they were downplaying my daughter's grief to cater to a brat. Am I the jerk? This sounds like blatant favoritism. Unfortunately, I don't think any school system on the planet has solved the problem of teachers showing favoritism. Here in America, I would advise you to go to the teacher, you have, then the principal, and if all that fails, go to the superintendent or the school board if things get bad enough. One thing is for sure, start a paper trail if you can. If you can email the teachers and principal, do that. CC whoever you should. Unrecorded conversations in person practically don't count. If you do have such a conversation, email the person you talked to afterwards outlining the things you talked about and try to get them to confirm what was said. Good luck. Everyone sucks here, and I do mean everyone. The best solution would have been for the teacher to redo the seating plan. She shouldn't have allowed a clique to form and become entrenched. I say this as a teacher. In the school where I was required to have a seating plan, I changed it pretty much every few weeks or when there were issues. I almost never just moved one or two kids unless they both requested it and it made sense. I generally started plans using a random name selector and then made adjustments to prevent problems. But I figured it did kids good to learn how to be near and work with a wide array of other people rather than just their friends. Your daughter was completely out of line with what she said and absolutely owes the other girl an apology. You would be missing a vital teaching opportunity if you did not teach her to do so. You're a jerk for being so close-minded that you can't see that it's a classroom full of kids who all have different backgrounds that you are not privy to. You are also a jerk for wanting to encourage the cool kid clique and referring to your kid as being punished when she was simply moved elsewhere. When my kids were younger and had tables, I know their teachers mix things up pretty regularly. Everyone sucks here. Your daughter's remarks were awful, and there's no justification for your daughter telling a foster kid that her parents didn't want her anymore. Period. The teachers were wrong for moving your kid because of Winnie, but your daughter is also not entitled to a certain seat with friends and to not sit in an undesirable location with kids you disapprove of. You're wrong for calling Winnie a brat when she has issues, all while commenting on your own kid's issues. You come across as someone who only feels like your kid's issue should be considered, or that your kid is entitled to things she's simply not entitled to. Not the jerk. Defend your kid. And to everyone saying, everyone sucks here, God help you if your kids are ever bullied in school. I hope you have the same energy you're displaying here. Am I the jerk for not wanting to pay for my son's dentist? My ex-wife, Lena, and I have a son, Matt, who's 6, and we share 50-50 custody. We don't have healthy co-parenting. We avoid each other most of the time, and everything in relation to the routine and Matt, we resolve it through an app. All expenses related to our son, such as school, doctors, and others, we split 50-50. I'm a dentist, to be clear, and until last year, before we separated, I took care of my son with this. Recently, she sent a message to me through the app, letting me know that the dentist appointment was this amount and for us to pay 50-50. I asked if some emergency had happened. She said no, just routine, and I asked why she didn't let me know, and I would take care of it. Her response was that now that she has her own dentist, she went through him, since our kid was with her and would be more easy. I agreed, but asked what the point of it was, because it would literally be free if it was done by me. She kind of snapped at me and said that she expected payment from me. I replied that I would see, because I don't refuse to pay anything for Matt, especially for health reasons, but a stupid expense like that doesn't make sense, and she can afford it, if she simply prefers to pay for something that I do for free. She was not happy. She said this was an expense for our son that we agreed to share, and I was refusing to do so, considering that I'm his father and that she was not obligated to choose me as a dentist. We do have an agreement to split 50-50, but for me, this is the most absurd expense that we've had, because I would understand if it was some emergency or outside of my specialty, but a routine appointment? Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Yes, she's mom, but this is a medical decision. Changing doctors should be something that's agreed on, not done unilaterally. I would look at the specific verbiage of the divorce decree. Do you have rights regarding medical care? Are you listed as his dentist? This sounds like she's deliberately just trying to make you pay extra, even if she has to pay extra to make you do so. Agreed. She's definitely doing this because she knew OP would make a stink about it. Who in the world, especially in this time, would pay extra for something someone would do for free? She's being petty. No jerks here. My initial thoughts as I read through this were that if I were in the situation as she is, and you say you don't have good communication and tend to avoid each other, I'd want my kid treated by someone who I didn't have a strained relationship with, so that I felt I could talk openly and freely about his medical and dental procedures. I totally get why you'd be surprised she went to another dentist, but to be honest, I probably would too. It's also possible that your son didn't want you to do the work and didn't want to tell you. Am I the jerk for not appreciating camping gear as a graduation gift? For context, I've always hated camping. Since I was a kid, this was a well-documented fact and routinely the butt of family jokes. On the other hand, my mother loves to go camping, hiking, backpacking, and has trips planned almost every other weekend until September. She recently expressed that she wants camping to be something that we do together after I graduate from college in a week or so. Last summer, we went on a camping trip with extended family in which I borrowed a sleeping bag and mentioned that it was comfy. When asked if I would want one in case of future trips, I said that I by no means needed one, but would be happy to have one if it went on sale or something to that effect. What started as a sleeping bag has now become that: a blow-up mattress, a tent, a backpack including shovels, and various other things. Not only do I now have a bunch of camping gear, but more recently, I've received the news that this gear is in fact my graduation gift. I'm not saying I don't appreciate the sentiment, nor that I don't acknowledge the money that went into getting these things. But every time my mother brings it up, I can't help but wish she had thought of something else. Not only does she know I don't care for camping, but as my mother, who I am close with, I feel overlooked and misjudged on things that I actually like. I'm graduating from film school and have always especially adored photography. When I was asked a while back if I had any ideas for graduation gifts, my first answer was a camera, as I've never had my own. This is the only thing that I've consistently wanted and expressed wanting for several years. Now, my best friend has mentioned that their parents, who historically don't gift well at all and aren't the greatest in general, are giving her the camera, which I have wanted for years. My mother knows this, and when I heard, I expressed that I would love to have something along those lines. I am the first in my family to have achieved a degree, and while I wasn't even expecting any graduation gift in the first place, I do feel like the one that I'm being given is not the one that's really for me. Rather, it's something which my mom got for me so that she could guilt me into staying at home longer in order to camp with her, as opposed to moving away for work. Even then, those camping trips that I mentioned, the ones that she has planned through the next year, I'm not going on any of them. Instead, my mom has decided that I have promised her, never did anything of the sort, that I will stay home for the year so that I can watch the house and pets while she goes off and does her soul searching. I've been told that to get a job and move away before they are done is inconveniencing her and causing her stress. So if I want to stay in her good graces, I need to be her house sitter and wait to actually get a job until it's convenient for her. Am I the jerk for being upset about this? Sell the camping gear and buy yourself a camera. The camping gear is yours. You can do with it what you want. Stay at your mom's house rent-free for a year while she goes off and does whatever. Get a job now. And if the job is too far away to live at your mom's house, well, she can find another pet sitter. Not the jerk, enjoy being an adult. The ability to say no and enforce it is one of the best perks. How I helped someone get revenge on their gold-digging significant other. This happened some years ago, but I was just reminded of it, so here you go, Reddit. I worked as a front desk agent in a large luxury hotel chain for years. One particular hotel I worked at was located really close to the downtown area, and so we got a large number of young, very wealthy business people who loved to party. I usually worked the second and third shifts, which meant I got to see loads of drunks, breakups, cheating, and more. This particular one though, this is one I will never forget. I was working at the front desk when a group of young, well-dressed men come walking in. They've all clearly been drinking, but aren't so drunk that they can't walk right or hold a conversation. One of them comes up to me and tells me that while he and his friends were at the bar, a woman was hitting on him, and even though he told her no multiple times, she wouldn't stop. So he and his friends left, and it wasn't until they got in the Uber that he realized he didn't have his room key anymore. He thinks she took it, and he's concerned that she may come up to his room. He asked that I deactivate his keys, and if she does come up to the hotel, to not let her in. When he was telling me all of this, it didn't sit right with me. He and his friends were all grinning about it and snickering amongst one another. Then he gave a clear description of her, without being asked. Told me her height, body shape, hair color, and style, the kind of dress she was wearing, all while saying it in a mocking tone. Now, this could have easily been because he thought the whole thing was ridiculous or he was too drunk to take it seriously. but it really didn't sound right to me. Either way, I did as I was trained in that situation. I pulled up his reservation, deactivated the keys as requested, made him a new set when he showed me his ID, and even offered to move him to a new room if that would make him feel more comfortable. He and his buddies all laughed a little at that, and he declined, took the keys, and they went to their room. About an hour or so later, the woman he described showed up. Now, by this point, my relief for the night had also shown up and was sitting at the front desk while I was in the back office counting down my cash drawer. I hadn't had a chance to tell him about the lady. Just as I'm walking out of the back office with my bag and about to leave, I see my coworker buzz the doors open and the lady comes rushing in, cuts through the lobby and down the hall to the elevators. She was barefoot, holding her heels in her hands, and knew exactly where she was going. I rushed up to him and told him what the man from before had told me about her. My coworker looked at me confused. He then pointed to the screen that had the reservation pulled up and told me that when the woman arrived, she went to use the room key and it didn't work. So he asked for her room number and last name. She gave both, and her name is on the reservation. I looked at the reservation, and down in the notes, there was a woman's name listed. The man from before was listed as the primary, but her name was listed as secondary, with his consent to be in the room. I was confused. I thought maybe she wasn't the same woman he was talking about. But to be on the safe side, I called the man in his room and told him the situation and that we allowed a woman fitting that description he gave to enter the building because she confirmed her name was on the room. He laughed, said he forgot her name was on the room, and asked that I remove it. I was now super confused. I asked to make sure. Me: "Sir, just to be clear, the woman you met at the bar tonight was with you at check-in hours ago and was allowed keys then, but now she's not?" Him, laughing to all of his friends in the room. "Oh, guys, I confused the poor girl." Gets back on the phone with me. "Yeah, sweetheart, she's banned from the room. Don't worry about the other details, just take her name off." Me: "I see. Then, if she isn't going to be in the room anymore, would you like us to call the police and have her removed from the property?" Him: "Ha ha ha, whoa, that's too far there. Don't worry, she'll get the hint soon enough." We ended the call there, and I got really suspicious of this. I told my coworker to not do anything and that I was going to stick around for a bit to see if anything happened. A short time later, the woman came off the elevator, pouring tears, sobbing while on the phone with someone. She sat down in our lobby, and my coworker and I tried to look busy while eavesdropping hard on her phone call. She was sobbing on the phone to her mom and sister. From what she told them, she was invited out to spend the week with her boyfriend, meeting all of his old college buddies. This being their first night, they all met up for dinner and drinks. After a bit, she went to the restroom, and when she came back, she caught her boyfriend hitting on another woman. His friends all bet that he wouldn't do it. When she confronted him about it, he called her a bunch of names and humiliated her in front of his friends and the entire bar. All of his friends joined in on mocking her, and he threw in her face that she was nothing without him and dumped her right there. He and his friends then took an Uber back and left her stranded at the bar with no money and no way back. She then had to use her phone's GPS and walk back to the hotel from the bar. Barefoot, she had heels, and walking 2 miles in those was not going to cut it. She was asking her mom and sister for help as he wouldn't let her in the room to get her luggage or her wallet. My heart broke. I felt horrible. I helped this guy treat this poor woman like crap, and now he and all his friends were up there laughing at her while she's sitting in our lobby sobbing and with nothing. I went over to our snacks area in the lobby, grabbed her a bottled water, and brought it to her. I told her that I couldn't help but overhear the conversation and was very sorry for her situation and asked if she would like us to help. I informed her that if he was keeping her from getting to her things, we could call the police and have them force him to hand over her stuff so she could leave if she'd like. Or if she wanted to let her mom or sister pay for a room, we'd be happy to give her a very low rate in a room far from him. She thanked me, took the water, and tried to calm down and talk to me about what all was happening and what our options were. Eventually, we decided on her staying in the hotel for the night and figuring out the rest in the morning. As we make it to the desk, she asks me to try and run her credit card to see if it has enough on it for another room. I ask her what she means by another room, and she tells me that she's actually paying for the room he's in, that his name is on the room because he booked it, but it's her card paying for everything. This intrigued me. I asked why she was paying for the room if it was in his name. She told me that she's the one with a job, not him. that he hasn't been able to find a job in his field since graduating from college and is essentially living off of his parents' money. But just after they started dating, his parents cut him off, so he's been living off of her money. That's why she was so upset and confused by how he had been acting all night. He was sweet and doing everything for her back home, but since he met up with his friends, he did a 180 and hasn't been the same guy the entire time. I wanted to tell her that it was obvious he was using her for the money and that he would probably blame his friends for all of this and try to get back with her later on. But I doubted she would have listened to me or cared for a complete stranger to butt in on her personal life like that. So instead, I offered up a sweet piece of revenge. I informed her that, considering she's the one paying for the room, if she can confirm that it's her card on file with some sort of photo ID and verify the last 4 digits of the card number, that's honestly all this hotel company required, then she could, if she wanted to, kick him out of the room and keep it all to herself. But considering how poorly her night had been, if she were indeed able to prove she is the one paying for the room, then I'd be more than happy to provide her the biggest luxury upgrade we offered at our property. Largest suite we had, full hotel amenity access. I'd even have my coworker fish out a bottle of champagne and some fresh strawberries for her to have sent to her room, all free of charge. She was taken aback by the offer and was very sincerely tempted. She looked like she was about to say no. Then I told her that since she would be upgrading her room, that would require moving her things from that room into her new one, which meant the room that she is currently listed in would need to be vacated immediately. If anyone were to remain in that room after we have demanded it be vacated, we are required to have them escorted off the property or they pay for the room. Their choice. She then thought about it, pulled up her card's banking app, and showed me the screen. It had a photo of her, her full name, the card's full number, and the hold from our hotel for the room. She asked if that worked. It was good enough for me. I quickly upgraded her, moved everything over in this system, and before I could say a word to my coworker, he was already grabbing a set of master keys, a bell cart, and was asking her what her luggage looked like, since he would be the one retrieving it for her to deliver to her room. He didn't want her to have to deal with her ex again. She smiled and told him which ones were hers and that she hadn't unpacked yet. My coworker runs down to the elevators and over to fetch her things, while I make her a new set of keys and send her off to her new room. Once she's on the elevator, my phone at the desk starts ringing. It's the ex-boyfriend, and he's very angry about why my coworker has entered the room and is taking her things. I calmly explain that I cannot give out the private information of any of our guests and that if he would like to remain in his room, he will need to pay for it, as there is no longer a method of payment on his room. He blew up. He's making a ton of demands, and at the same time yelling at my coworker to stop what he's doing. But it's obvious from the way he's yelling at him that my coworker isn't listening to him. I can even hear the guy's friends telling him to chill out and to just pay for the room. I then explain that we will give him a courtesy 10 minutes to make a decision, at which point, if he doesn't have payment ready, then he must vacate the building or we will be forced to call the authorities and have him evicted. He continues to yell at me. He screams and threatens and yells for a solid minute before taking a breath. I then tell him he has 9 minutes remaining and ask if he has come to a decision yet. He hangs up on me. 9 minutes later, I call the room and he doesn't answer. I call again, no answer. I call a third time and he picks up, then immediately hangs up. I call the police and tell them what's going on and they say they're on their way. The officers arrive and I tell them what's going on. We go up to the room together and the man and his friends are all white as ghosts when they see the cops. The cops explain to the ex-boyfriend and his friends that they're being evicted. The ex-boyfriend starts trying to talk to me, but the cop stops him and tells him to only talk to them. I told him about his attitude on the phone before. The friends are all offering to pay for the room at this point, and the cops look to me and ask if that would be acceptable. I smile very sweetly and say no, and the cops nod and start rushing all of the guys to grab their things and leave the room. The ex-boyfriend is the last one out the door, carrying his 2 bags and complaining that he isn't even given a luggage card and he has to carry his own things. His friends all look upset with him. I go with the officers to escort all of them out of the building and run into my coworker in the lobby. He waits until they're all outside in the parking lot to tell me that the woman is in her new room, loves it, and said no to the champagne. She just wanted to sleep. I didn't get to see her before she left town the next day, but the ex-boyfriend did try calling our hotel to complain a number of times and even tried leaving some bad reviews of us online and lied through all of it. I hope she doesn't have to ever deal with him again. Speaking of hotels, what's your favorite hotel you've ever stayed at? Please let us know. Bellagio for the win. Am I the jerk for giving my MacBook to my cat and not my sister? Okay, so I know this sounds a little ridiculous, so bear with me. Just last week, I purchased a new MacBook for myself. My old one lasted me 5 years, and it's still technically working, but due to some water damage, the speakers are completely done for. The screen flickers quite a bit when not charging, and overall it's just slow. I have no use for it anymore. Regarding my cat, so I live in a fairly small apartment, and although it has windows, there really isn't much to see, besides a few trees in the parking lot really. I got my cat a few months ago, and I have a cat tree by the window, shelves and spaces so she can climb up high, and quite a few toys to play with. At first, my cat had no problem hanging by the window, but eventually I noticed she started to get bored, and while I'm in the middle of working, she would constantly meow or do mischievous things. I put on cat TV a few times for her and noticed she really enjoyed it and would stare at it for hours. However, I would put this on my new TV, as this was really the only free screen I had. She would at times pounce at the TV, once almost knocking it back. After I got my brand new laptop, I figured I'll barely get anything for selling my old one. I might as well use it for my cat. It works great. I put on Cat TV on YouTube and have the back of the laptop screen against the wall beside me. So while I'm working, she just sits there looking at the screen, occasionally pawing at it, and then falling asleep. Of course, I still play with her and give her plenty of pets, but I found this is a great way to keep her mentally stimulated. This also prevents any concern of her damaging my electronics or hurting herself. I took a photo of her sitting and looking at the laptop because it looked like she was hard at work and thought it was funny and sent it to my family. My brother and mom laughed, but my sister messaged me. Sister: "Hey, you gave your MacBook to the cat?" Me: "Yes, mine was pretty banged up and I needed a new one, and this keeps her occupied." "Okay, well, if you're no longer using it, can I have it?" Me: "Well, there really is no point, considering there are so many issues with it. It's not like the cat owns it. I just use it for her to keep her occupied when I feel like she needs to see more than just the parking lot." Sister: "So you're gonna keep it for your cat rather than give it to me, who needs it for school? MacBooks aren't cheap." Me: "I'm aware they aren't cheap, but there are other companies." This basically went on for a bit until she said I was being an inconsiderate jerk. If the MacBook was in better condition, I would totally give it to her, but fixing the screen and speakers and replacing the battery will cost about the same or more as a mid-range Windows laptop. My mom and brother just kinda laughed at it and said not to worry, but my sister is being pretty cold with me. Am I the jerk? Well, who do you agree with? OP or their sister? Please let us know. We can solve this whole thing by just giving it to me. And give me that new one too while you're at it. Sir, this can take as long as you need. I'm paid by the hour. I do feel kind of bad about this one now, but it happened a few years ago and it's a funny story to tell, so what the heck. I used to be a shift manager at a collectibles store where we sold a lot of used movies, games, figurines, etc. The kind of place that old school collectors drool over, so we saw our fair share of enthusiasts coming and going. A lot of them were really nice, passionate people that were just jazzed as heck that they had a local place to look for rarities. Often chatty, often not super aware of how much time they were taking from staff by striking up a conversation. But it was both good for business and pretty fun to oblige these people when they came in, so we often did. We had a guy who, for a period of a few months, would come in about once a week to look at the cartridge games. The thing to know about our cartridge games is that they were all on display in this large glass case, which, if you wanted to sift through them, required an employee to wait with you to prevent theft. Some stuff in those cases was worth hundreds of dollars. Not typically a big problem, but this guy often bought items in bulk and had very particular tastes. I'm not sure if he was a reseller, which we sometimes saw, or an honest-to-goodness collector, but he'd only ever buy bags of our cheapest stock. Every week he'd come in and request someone open each case one by one, and he could spend 45 minutes to an hour just browsing through titles. This wouldn't have been the biggest deal, but we typically only had 3 or 4 people working, and the store could get pretty busy on evenings and weekends. Going from 2 cashiers to 1 cashier made a big difference. We would end up getting swallowed by the late day rush without one of our staff members so consistently that we started making a policy just for this guy, where he could leave his ID at the counter with us as collateral and browse through the games unattended. However, this didn't stop other people from nabbing stuff while he wasn't looking, so it wasn't a sustainable option. Along with spending forever browsing, This guy also took an eternity to check out. He would group the games up by price, type his estimated cost into a calculator, add tax, then when you rang it up, he'd argue with you about how, no, this isn't what I got. Look at this, and show you the calculator and explain the math, as if any of this was manually calculated by us, which was basically always wrong. To his credit, sometimes discounts had to be manually added to certain items that I know at least one newbie forgot to do. But in general, most of the time, the computer would generate the correct price and he'd argue it. I didn't like him coming in and causing backups, especially because he was rude to my staff when he did it. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. On a day when I was shift leader, I saw him enter the store. I pulled aside one of my cashiers and told him to just help the guy as usual, then let me ring him up. My employee got the idea and did as I asked, walking our regular to the cabinets and babysitting him for nearly an hour. Luckily, it was early afternoon and we weren't terribly busy. When the customer finally got to the counter, he had a basket full of items, stacked them up, and I hopped in front of the computer. He started punching all of his values into the calculator and got right to work telling me about how much each thing should be and what the total should come to. I put on my best customer service smile and said, "Of course, sir. I want to make sure that you're getting everything exactly as calculated, so we can go down the items together and make sure everything rings up correctly." Our computers ran on a system that would automatically scan a price and generate the number, but for things like specialty sales and discounts for items that didn't have their own product entry, it was possible for a manager to key in a manual price for any item scanned, even if it was the same price. So that's exactly what I did. For each item, reading the price out slowly to him to make sure he heard it. And he had 118 items. I went down each old cartridge, clearly stating and typing them. $1.99, $2.99, $1.99, and he followed along with me. By the time I got to the end of the list, it must have been 15 to 20 minutes of just scanning items, and I gave him his total. Of course, he countered it. He told me that that's not what he got on his calculator and showed me the math and explained how everything should have been applied. "My mistake, sir. Let's go through it again to make sure we have everything right." I cleared the transaction and started over. One more time, all 118 items, reading each price as slowly and clearly as I could, plunking the number keys loudly as I typed them in. Again, another 15 to 20 minutes of just scanning and typing. The customer was looking slightly agitated, but followed along on his calculator, and when I got to the end of the list, the total was exactly the same as before. He shook his head, saying, "No, that's not right. There's something wrong with the computer." I watched him go through the math again, retyping everything in, then after a moment, he paused, surprised. "Oh, I added one of these in wrong. Okay, you had the right price." I did my best to keep my face as calm and apologetic as possible. "I'm sorry, sir, but after you said the math was wrong, I cleared the transaction again. No worries, we can scan the items back in." So there we went, round 3, 118 items. Me typing in each price manually and reading it out loud, nice and slow, so he could be sure I was doing it right. At this point, he had definitely caught on to what I was doing. He quietly said, "Could we hurry it up a little?" And so I started reading and plunking a bit faster. Still took a nice 15 minutes to get through the list again, and lo and behold, same price as before. He paid the total without another word and left with his items. I never saw him back in the store again, at least not while I was working. Boss makes major changes to the schedule and gets me fired. This happened way back in the 90s when I had a night job as a computer operator on a mainframe. Big computer that Windows 3.1 is more powerful, or so it seemed. Our company relocated to a neighboring state over a weekend, and I was scheduled to work Saturday and Sunday nights, 12 hours each, and have off Friday, but was told to call Friday at 6 p.m. for directions to the new place. While I was there, I didn't know how to get there from where I lived. Since I wasn't scheduled, I ran the errands that I would do over the rest of the weekend because of the schedule, and at 6 I called. Conversation went like this. Me: "Hello, boss. I'm calling to get directions to the new building." Boss: "Good." He gave me directions and said he'll see me in an hour. Me: "What? I'm not scheduled, and I haven't been to sleep yet as I wasn't supposed to be there." Boss: "Plans changed. Sorry, I forgot to call." This meant I wasn't going to get any sleep for basically 2 days, and I told him that. He didn't care. I said I've got to crash for a couple and would be there when I could. I grabbed a 2-hour nap and drove the hour there. Needless to say, I crashed out at 3 a.m. and was caught the next day by boss. I did get everything done I was supposed to get, But things happen. Well, I got threatened with being fired, but wasn't. But I was written up for it, and everyone else that was involved told him he was wrong. He didn't care. So 5 or 6 months of BS happened, and he decided to demote me to distribution clerk. This meant I had to separate thousands of pages of reports and get them to the right person. Of course, I wasn't trained to do this, and mistakes happened. So here's where the fun begins. He called me into his office, left the door open, and just yelled at me. He told me that I wasn't to separate or distribute the reports, just pull them off the printer and let someone that wasn't a mess up do it. I realized something then, and I smiled to myself and said for him to put that in writing. The idiot did. The letter with the company logo stated that under no circumstances was I to distribute the reports. I said okay and happily went on my way. He was going on vacation that night, and I knew the crap storm that was going to happen since that night, a Thursday on the last day of the month, was the night the paychecks were printed. Well, the difference with paychecks is that they were run through a special machine that separated them. There were about 500 or so, and then they would be placed in envelopes by the payroll department. They picked up first thing in the morning. So about 10 minutes before they were to arrive, I got my coffee in Danish and waited. Payroll clerk. Where are the checks? Me. Over there. I pointed to a 2-foot pile of papers. Clerk. I need them separated. Me. Can't do it. Clerk. Why not? Me. Boss ordered me not to. I showed her a copy of the letter as I took the original home. Clerk. We'll see about that. Me. Okay. Clerk got boss's underling, who was actually a decent person. Underling. OP, what's going on? Me. Boss told me in no uncertain terms that under any conditions am I to separate or distribute any reports, so I'm not. Underling. He knows the reasons. I'll authorize it. Me. I'm not letting you take the heat for it. Call him and get permission. Once that's done, it'll take 5 to 10 minutes to do it. Underling. Okay. He reaches for the phone, tries to call him, and no response. He went hunting, and there were no phones. I said sorry, won't do it. Finished my coffee, put my coat on, and went home. Told him I'd see him Monday, as I don't work Friday. I handed him the copy of his letter and left. They did manage to separate the checks eventually, and everyone got paid. I had direct deposit, so I didn't care. Nothing they could do to me as I followed my instructions to the letter, but I knew I was done there, and I didn't care. Boss got in trouble for that, and made it his goal to get me to quit. But I wanted unemployment, so that wasn't happening. I got fired a month later and was told my goodbyes were talked about for months. When I saw him by my now former workmates, I let him have it. Last thing I said to him was that his boss needed him under his desk now. Run along and bring tissues, you'll need some. About a month or so later, I wanted to say hello to the guys I worked with for 10 years, and who answers the phone? Boss. Except now he was demoted to what was my position and had to work third shift and weekends. He didn't last long. I found out later where he went to and realized a dear friend of mine worked there too. Got him fired. I ran into him at a street fair a year later, and the only reason I didn't rip him a new one was that he had his son with him. I'm too nice. You won't accept my card? Okay, see you soon. Yesterday, I had to go get my diploma at college. Yay, 2020 class, what's up? On the way there, I remembered my spoiled 6-year-old brother demands sweets every time someone comes home. So to avoid his tantrum and my mom yelling at me for not getting him anything, I decided to stop on my way back and buy him some candy. By the time I was back, everywhere was closed, except for a Walmart and a little deli owned by an old neighborhood couple, whom I'll call Boomer and Karen. So I decided to support our local community and whatnot. After standing on the socially distant line for a single chocolate bar, I finally got to the cashier/Karen, who refused to accept my card because the chocolate was like $2, and they only accepted 30 plus on debit. Both her and Boomer, with an old fart thinking their smart smirk, then suggested I buy more stuff to match the value. I refused, so she started yelling at me for wasting her time and messing with the store. Remember, I got a single chocolate bar. While she yelled, I saw a stand saying they were taking delivery orders through X app and little photos of different debit and credit cards. I had used it a few times already. I just looked at her, said okay, and left. When I was outside, I looked up their store. No minimum value and no delivery fee. So it was my time to smirk now. I waited a few minutes, ordered the dang chocolate, put the delivery address at a house a few numbers away, and waited there. Seeing Boomer trotting down the street in full protection gear with a single chocolate in a bag, look at me right under the delivery number he was looking for and stop in his tracks. the visible parts of his face getting redder and redder. Lovely. I extended my hand and said, "Thanks." He handed me the bag without a word. I watched as he walked back to his deli, taking mental notes to never go there again, then walked back home with a smile under my mask. This little game took almost 30 minutes, but the feeling of owning greedy boomers was worth it. So much for supporting the locals. I'm sorry I don't work next door. So I work for a martial arts studio. My husband is the instructor and I answer phones, sell contracts, and do the marketing. We're in a nice plaza with a very popular restaurant on one side and a tutoring center on the other. Due to everything that's been going on, we leave the doors locked and only allow people in if they have a reservation for the class. Students are only allowed in 5 minutes before their scheduled class. There's a large sign on the door that states our business name with a large logo. The text on the sign is large enough to be read by parents attempting to drop off on the curb. It states, "No reservation, no mask, no entry. No one will be permitted inside until 5 minutes before scheduled class." Today, my husband went to the back to check stock on uniforms and get an inventory together for me and left me up front alone to sanitize between classes. I masked up, spraying the air and all surfaces when someone tugs on the door. A lady and her son I don't recognize were standing on the sidewalk looking at me expectantly. I figured they wanted information, so I grabbed my keys, walked outside and greeted them. Me: "Hello, welcome to our martial arts studio. How can I help you?" Lady: "We have an appointment for my son to take a placement test." Me, realizing they want the tutoring center: "Oh, I'm sorry, this is martial arts studio. I think you're looking for the place next door." Lady: "Their door is locked. Let me in so my son can take his test. We have an appointment." She then tugs on the door to our place. Me: "I am very sorry. Without a reservation to one of our classes, I cannot let you or your son in. We are a martial arts studio and not a tutoring center. You want the next door down. Let me show you." I walked to the next door down and knocked on the glass to get the people inside's attention. Lady: "Just use your keys and let me in, or I'll take my business elsewhere. This is horrible customer service." Me: "Again, I don't work for that company. I can't let you in or help you with that." I knocked again as the tutoring center is quite large. The girl that works the front desk came out of the back and smiled at me and opened the door. Lady: "It's about time. This woman would not let me in. She has the worst customer service I've ever experienced. I have an appointment." Tutoring girl: "She doesn't work here, but yes, come in and I'll get you situated." I went back to work and told my husband, who was wondering where I had gone. Anticlimactic, I know, but it gave me a chuckle, so I thought I'd share. The McDonald's Screeching Lady. I typically bring my lunch to work. However, on occasion, I will go to the nearby McDonald's. This probably happens about once a month or so. It was a weekday, and I was eating in the seating area. I was wearing my uniform, which is a black blouse and black slacks, but I had taken off my name tag for my break. I had my coat and my purse with me in the booth beside me, but I will give the entitled lady a benefit by saying she probably didn't notice it. As I was eating, the actual manager came over to my table. She had to teach a new hire how to make an ice cream cone, so she was giving it to me as no one had ordered one. Don't blame them, this was December. But free ice cream, so I accepted. Side note, I do know the manager from a previous encounter where I had to call 911 for an elderly lady in medical distress. I had to write out my version of events in a report for the manager, as I guess she had to report it to the head office. I wasn't surprised when she approached me, because we do tend to say hello to one another when I go there. So I'm seated, eating, when an entitled lady approaches me. I work in customer service and immediately can tell that this lady is upset. Unfortunately, I was still in work mode, so I didn't immediately tell her to buzz off. Basically, the lady started to complain about the wait time for her food and that her son wasn't happy with his burger. I smiled, said it's lunch hour, so you probably should expect a wait time. The lady's son was not with her. I have no idea what his complaint actually was. The lady said I should hire more people so the lunch wait isn't so long. I realized she isn't just complaining to me randomly, and I told her I don't work here. This is when she said I clearly work here, as I'm in uniform and the worker was just talking to me. Still polite, I laughed a little and simply said I do know the manager, but I don't work here. She stormed off in a huff and I went back to eating, thinking that was that. Nope. I then hear her screeching from the counter area. I couldn't see her, but I could hear her berating the workers for ignoring her, then yell about how the manager was lazy and she demanded a corporate number. Something else must have happened because it was quiet when I packed up my things to leave. The entitled lady was still there, fuming, while the actual manager was talking to her calmly. I wish I could say the lady was kicked out of the store, but I left to return to work and prayed she didn't come over to my store, where I would actually need to deal with her. She didn't come over, and I hope I never see her again. My entitled mom was afraid of doctors, and it almost cost me big time. My mother, the entitled mom of our tale, grew up in a household that didn't believe in doctors or going to the hospital. This translated to an irrational fear of hospitals for my entitled mom. At the time of this story, I was 14, in high school, and about to have a very bad day. I should start by saying that my entitled mom lives exactly 1 mile away from the closest emergency room. Also, my siblings and father were out of town for a competition that weekend. I didn't feel like going to another cheerleading competition, so I stayed home. I get home from school on a Friday around 4 p.m. and call entitled mom to tell her that I don't feel good and I think I need to see a doctor. Entitled mom says that she has a 1-hour workout with her personal trainer, PT, who happens to train the whole family for our sports teams. Entitled mom tells me that she will come home right after and take me to the pediatrician. 4:40 p.m. I call entitled mom saying that something is seriously wrong with me and I really think I need to go to the hospital. She tells me that personal trainer just had a cancellation and she's staying for another hour workout, then she will take me to the doctor. 5:10 p.m. I call my entitled mom and beg her to come home because I'm in a lot of pain and I feel terrible. She gives the phone over to personal trainer who says, I kid you not, it sounds like a muscle cramp from our workout last week. You'll be fine, buddy. She says she will call our friendly neighbor across the street to check on me. 10 minutes later, I hear friendly neighbor walk in through the door and come to my room to check me out. I'm on the floor because I fell after going to the bathroom and couldn't get up. She helps me into bed and immediately calls entitled mom. Conversation goes something like this. Friendly neighbor. Hey, entitled mom, I think you need to get here ASAP. Your son is white as a sheet and sweating bullets. Also, he's in so much pain he can barely move. Entitled mom. Oh, I'm sure he's fine. Probably just overreacting from a muscle cramp like personal trainer says. Neighbor. This isn't just a muscle cramp. He needs to see a doctor. I can put him in my car and meet you at the hospital ER that's just 1 mile away. Entitled mom. No need for that. I'll finish up here and head home to take him to the doctor. Click. 5:45 p.m. Friendly neighbor calls entitled mom again, and entitled mom says she's changing and will be home in 10 minutes. The gym is pretty close. 6:20 p.m. Entitled mom finally gets home. Friendly neighbor tells her what I've been going through and says I need to go to the ER. Entitled mom says she's taking me to see our pediatrician. Entitled mom does take me to our pediatrician, who also runs a pediatric ER. The problem is that the doctor's office is 25 minutes drive away with zero traffic, and we are in a rush hour. 7:15ish p.m. We get to the pediatric ER and they immediately take me into the back to see what's wrong. Turns out I have an acute appendicitis and it's close to bursting, so they need to send me over to the hospital that's 1 mile from my house to get it removed. The entire time, my entitled mom is murmuring about needing to get ready for a trial the next day. She's a divorce lawyer, and how I'll probably be fine and just need to sleep it off. Then there comes a moment when entitled mom is out of the room, but I have a doctor and a nurse in the room alone with me. I tell them the whole story about how I've been trying to get her to take me to the ER since 4. How we lived only a mile away from the hospital they wanted to send me to, but my entitled mom decided to go here because she hates big hospitals. The doctor didn't really believe me until I told him the MapQuest, old school I know, my address relative to the hospital. I managed to convince them to call for an ambulance to transport me to the hospital to make sure I got there. After my surgery, the nurse told me that the appendix burst as they began the surgery, so they had to be quick. To this day, I still tease personal trainer every time I see him by grabbing my side and saying I think I have a muscle cramp. I've never heard him use those words together since. Have you ever had to go to an ER for anything? If so, what was it? Please let us know. Hippity hoppity, this is no longer your property. After graduating college, my girlfriend and I moved to a new state where she was accepted into an engineering program. We found a lovely garden apartment-style complex that advertised 100 megabytes per second internet speed, included in the price among a few other amenities. When we met the property manager, he seemed strict but well-mannered, nothing out of the ordinary, until we signed the lease. The first problem. Suddenly, walking into his office was not allowed without an appointment. I had come by to ask a question, saw him browsing social media, and figured he was as available as he made himself to us when we first came by, unannounced to view a model apartment. Nope, He refused to answer my question and asked me to make an appointment via email. The second problem. The terms of our lease included an attachment to complete within 48 hours of accepting the keys that details all discrepancies within the unit. We submitted the attachment via email around the 40th hour. The property manager responded that the terms recently changed from 48 to 24 hours, and since we had passed 24 hours, we would be held liable for all found damages. When citing our copy of the lease, which explicitly stated 48 hours, he informs us that we signed an outdated copy and would need to make an appointment to come by the office and sign a new lease. The third problem. The internet speed was not 100 megabytes per second as advertised. It was less than 15 off-peak and about 5 on-peak. We again contacted the property manager to complain, but we were referred to make an appointment. The fourth problem. We made an appointment to address the previous 3 problems. During this meeting, and after I finished voicing our issues, the property manager leans forward and says, "There are other communities in this neighborhood that may be more accepting of people like you and your girlfriend. You're welcome to break the lease and leave." People like you and your girlfriend. I had thought he was referencing our no-nonsense response to his nonsense, daily communication, scheduling multiple meetings to address these issues, etc. But my girlfriend believed he was speaking towards colors. Her, a black woman, and myself, a white man. My girlfriend jokingly told me to check my privilege before getting serious and explaining to me that we were experiencing discrimination at the very least. The solution. I did some research and discovered the property manager worked for a larger organization that owns several complexes throughout the country. I found their director of human resources on LinkedIn and made a connection. I then emailed her copies of all email correspondence, screenshots of the lease, pictures of the internet speed flags advertised by the road, and more screenshots of online speed tests. We further noted his comment and the implications behind it. The human resources director replied within a few hours and promised us she would look into the issue. About 2 days later, the property manager called and asked us to come by his office at our convenience. We showed up near the end of the day and sat down across from him. He then proceeded to ask us if we would be willing to write a letter stating we accepted his apology, despite not yet offering said apology, and in return he would credit us a month's rent, accept our damages attachment, and promise to have the ISP on site within a week to assess the internet issues. We declined. He got personal with us and revealed his job may be at stake and asked us to reconsider. My girlfriend leaned forward a bit and said, "There are other communities in this neighborhood that may be more accepting of people like you. You're welcome to leave." The property manager was replaced in a week with a super sweet older lady who not only gave us all of the things the original property manager had promised, the 1-month rent credit, accepting the damages attachment, and then further scheduling maintenance to fix said damages, having the ISP assess and upgrade the internet to promised speeds, but she also made it clear that her office was always open for anything we may need. I looked up the old property manager about a few months later on LinkedIn, still unemployed. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have accepted the property manager's apology or not? Please let us know. Of course not. Sounds like he got what he deserved. Am I the jerk for being grossed out by my girlfriend rarely washing her hair and not brushing it? Since quarantine started, my girlfriend has gotten very into a new hair care routine. I guess one of her friends was trying it and she wanted to see if it would work for her hair. It's wavy and curly. Since starting it, her hair is definitely way more curly and it does look nice. However, as we were talking about it, she mentioned that she only washes her hair every 3 to 4 days. And I tried not to say anything, but I definitely had a shocked look on my face. So when she asked what was wrong, I said I thought that was unhygienic. She said it's healthier for it and said it's not a big deal because it's not like her hair smells or anything. Which of course it's not going to smell bad when you're loading it up with a bunch of hair products every day. On top of this, I realized yesterday she didn't even brush her hair anymore. She was cooking and I came up and rubbed her back a bit and my fingers ran through her hair a bit. She said, "Ow," and pulled back a bit and asked if I'd please be careful since it hurts when her hair is tugged on like that. I said sure, fine, don't want to cause her pain, but I was also like, what do you do when you need to brush it then? And she said she never brushes it, only uses a comb in the shower when her hair is wet. Meaning she only ever combs through it every 3 to 4 days. I was like, what? Are you trying to grow dreads? To which she just said, that wouldn't ever happen, I'm white. Which wasn't even my point, but whatever. She was like, what is wrong? and I said I just found it gross that she doesn't take basic care of her hair. She just laughed and said I don't know what I'm talking about, so don't be a jerk about it. Am I the jerk? I don't think it's that ridiculous to be put off by someone not practicing regular hygiene, but she is very proud of her hair lately. Edit. Thank you for your comments, everyone. I accept that I'm the jerk here. I looked up the curly girl method some of you posted about and apologized to my girlfriend. She said that tomorrow, after she washes her hair, I can watch her put the products in and see specifically how she maintains the hair. So I'm going to do that. All is well here again. Edit 2. Wow, this blew up. Again, I fully accept I was being the jerk, and I completely understand why. To give some more context, with the permission of my girlfriend also lives with bipolar type 2, and in the past, changes in hygiene have always been an indicator of a mood swing. Obviously, that wasn't the case this time around, but after talking it through, I realized that this past experience is part of what informed my own concern. Obviously, that doesn't excuse my judginess, but I was just glad that after talking it through, I was able to figure out for myself what was actually poking at me. Not the hair, but rather me worrying that something else was going on. I'm really glad I know about the CGM now, and I'm actually really excited for my girlfriend to show me her routine tomorrow. Also, my girlfriend is having a fun time reading through the comments, and we're both laughing about how much of a jerk I was about this. She also now wants to make a Reddit account to join the Curly Girl subreddit, so thank you to everyone who suggested that. Well, what do you think? Was OP a jerk or not? Please let us know. Maybe he's bold and he's just jealous of her. You need to check all of our food? Fine. So this happened like 7 or 8 years ago when I was jobbing at a driving service while I was a student. The driving service was one for people with disabilities that could not drive or walk on their own. Our main office was in the building of a housing/working facility for disabled people. The two companies, our driver's service and the housing facility, were loosely connected as they were both financed by the same organization. However, management-wise, they were clearly separated. We were about 15 drivers at this location, and we shared our lunch/social room with about 10 caretakers. Since our schedules were horribly organized, the drivers often had idle time, so the social room was where everyone hung out waiting for work. One day, my boss, let's call him Tom, brought cake to work because he turned 60. The cake was enormous, like a wedding cake could hide behind it twice. I can only imagine how expensive it must have been. At 9, every driver had eaten some pieces and there were still like 80% left, so Tom told the caretakers they should feel free to take some. Then Karen happened. She was something like the security inspector of the facility, so she had authority over the caretakers but no dealings with the driving service. Her job was to watch for potential hazards, organize the caretaker's schedule, and generally having an eye on everything happening. When she heard there was cake, she was furious. She and Tom couldn't stand each other, so she was always trying to ruin his day. In this particular instance, she claimed the cake was a health hazard as it contained cream, and she could not verify whether the cooling chain was broken during transport, so she threw it all away. Roughly 400 euros worth of food just thrown away. Needless to say, Tom was less than amused. He went extremely mad. He was usually a very calm and gentle man, and this was the only time that I had heard him shouting at someone. Still, there was nothing he could do. Karen could basically declare anything a hazard and take action how she saw fit, and her higher-ups didn't really care. To make matters worse, she doubled down and demanded that any food that was brought into the social room had to be inspected by her first. Cue malicious compliance. Obviously, all the drivers were mad at Karen for upsetting Tom and for throwing away a perfectly fine cake. So the next day, first thing in the morning, 15 drivers went to her office, everyone with his lunch demanding she inspect it. It took her roughly 10 minutes looking at sandwiches and answering questions whether mayonnaise was too hazardous to be brought in. This went on for the whole week. Each day, our questions about hazardous food becoming more and more dumb. On Friday, it took her more than 2 hours to inspect our lunches as we would collectively steal her time. After noon, she said she got the message and that sandwiches got a general okay and not to bother her with it anymore. Fine. The following week, we went out of our way to eat anything but sandwiches. Salads, cake, pretzels, normal lunch stuff. Every day, there was a line in front of her office having their lunch checked, asking stupid questions, whether this food was or was not too dangerous to enter the social room. Karen was losing her patience, becoming increasingly aggressive towards us, but still refused to apologize to Tom. Then at the end of week 2 of food checking, Tom brought a bucket for lunch. When he entered Karen's office to have his lunch checked, like he did every day, and opened the lid of his lunch pot, the smell hit everyone in the vicinity like a brick to the face. Apparently, he had made some unholy mix of garlic, cream, pickles, and herring, which he called fish soup. It looked like what happens if you leave something dead in the sun for too long, all brownish and sluggy with some green specks in it, and reeked twice as bad as it looked. Karen looked as if she would puke any moment, commanding him to remove this monstrosity from her office. Tom asked if she didn't want to check it, since he could imagine the cooling chain could have been broken during transport or sometime in the last 2 weeks. The lot of us drivers laughed so hard. I swear, some nearly choked from laughter. This was roughly the time that Karen had to admit defeat. Food checking stopped immediately, and the following week, Tom brought another cake. Speaking of cake, what's your favorite flavor of cake? Please let us know. I could go for some carrot cake right now. Am I the jerk for calling my brother-in-law an idiot after he got himself fired? My brother-in-law recently got fired from his job as a high school physical education teacher for posts he made on social media. He has been warned by the school in the past that some students and parents have complained about some of the things he posts on social media, so this wasn't a one strike and you're out thing. I won't say exactly what he was posting about, but he has a habit of posting things from questionable sources. Because the school he worked for was doing mostly distance learning, his phys ed class basically became an online physical health class. During one of his classes, a student of his was acting up and brother-in-law tried to keep him in line. An argument started, and the kid ended up bringing up brother-in-law's Facebook page on his phone and started reading off posts to the whole class, and basically chaos ensued as the whole class erupted into a Zoom meeting melee. Of course, the school administration got involved, and brother-in-law ended up being let go. He's currently trying to challenge the firing through his union, but they apparently aren't being as helpful as he would like. Brother-in-law and his wife were over at my house the other weekend, so our kids could get together, and I asked him how he was doing. He started going off about how people are too sensitive and can't handle anyone with disagreeing opinions. He then said that the school had infringed on his freedom of speech, and he was thinking about suing them. I stopped him and told him that's not how freedom of speech works, since the school isn't the government trying to censor him. He said he should be free to say whatever he wants. I told him that he's right. He can say whatever he wants, but that doesn't mean he's free from consequences when he says stupid things. I asked him why he didn't just set his social media to private after the school warned him about it previously. He said he didn't think he needed to do that because nothing he was posting was false or offensive, and it was just another way for the school to try and censor him. I dropped it after that and went to play with the kids. But an hour or so later, he brought it up again and asked if I agreed with him that he was in the right. I asked him if he wanted me to be honest with him, and he said yes. So I told him I think he's an idiot and that he had been warned and didn't take any steps to prevent it from getting worse. He got mad and said he always knew I was one of those types and that I was part of the reason our country's freedoms are being taken away from us. I told him none of his freedoms are being taken away, but that we should just drop it for now. He stewed silently for the rest of their visit, and after they left, my wife asked me what happened since she didn't hear our conversation. I told her what we talked about, and she said it was kind of a jerk move on my end because of how fresh everything is for them. Well, who do you agree with? OP or his brother? Please let us know. And that's why you can't get too woke. It usually doesn't turn out well. No microwaves allowed, you say? Another post reminded me of this. This story is most of 2 decades old, so details are not precise. When I was in college, as many people do, I lived in a dorm. Now, my college had 3 different groups of dorms. One that was in the main set of buildings that was mostly seniors, one that was mostly sophomores and juniors, and one that was almost all freshmen. The freshman dorm area had beds that were fixed to the walls, desks fixed to the walls, and built-in bookcases. It also had one common room for about 150 students, paired 2 to a room, and only 1 microwave in the common room. We weren't, ostensibly, allowed microwaves in the rooms. It makes sense. There were false fire alarms frequently from burnt popcorn in the lounge area. I can only imagine what horrors a bunch of 18-year-olds would concoct in their rooms if they were blithely allowed microwaves. Most people just went along with it while grumbling. But oh no, not me. I was complaining one day about the rule and how those of us who weren't idiots could handle a simple microwave. The RA overheard, laughed, and said I was welcome to try and find a way around it, but she had never found one. Being the nerd I am, though, I went and read the handbook in detail. On page 59 it said no microwaves, but literally page 60 it said Any appliance under 1000 watts is allowed. So I found a microwave that was under that. Pathetic little thing at 500 watts, granted, in a Walmart ad. Took the ad and handbook to her boss, the residence life director. To her chagrin, she had to admit that any appliance under 1000 watts was allowed, and the handbook did say any appliance after all. She agreed to let me have my microwave as long as I didn't let the rest of the students in on this little trick. I agreed. You are fine, go back to class. I was 14, maybe 2 months into high school and in gym class. Teacher had us doing an exercise where you run forward and then backwards and then forward and then backwards. When I tripped running backwards and threw my hands back to catch myself. Since we were doing this exercise on the rubber cement track, I feel instant pain and I let out a cry. Teacher, without looking, says to go to the nurse while I sobbed in pain. I walk, by myself, up to the school doors and try to open the door, and I can't even move my fingers. Since I was sent back by myself, I sit on the ground and sob some more. A FedEx driver pulls up, sees me, asks what's wrong, and instantly goes into panic mode. He opened every door from the front door to the nurse. He explains how he found me, and she asks what happened. After explaining, she briefly looks at me and says, "The bell is about to ring. You're fine. Go back to class." When I asked her to just call my mom, she said no. She opens the door after me faking about not being able to move my fingers, and I make my way back to gym. I decided, even though I had a phone and could have asked someone to call my mom, that if I was fine, I would go back to class. I managed to convince a friend of my cousin's to take my binder and books to my next class, where I couldn't take notes or participate because I was getting dizzy from pain and wanted to puke. Had one of my friends take my books from that class to the next one, my second to last class of the day, and my cousin is in there. She sees me silently sobbing, trying to pay attention, and asks what happened. And once I explained, she called my mom in the middle of class. Not even 15 minutes later, my name is called from the speaker to go to the nurse. My cousin takes my stuff and puts it in my locker. Once I get to my mom, she explodes when she sees my wrists. Yes, you read that right. My wrists are twice the size and purple. She's screaming, asking why she wasn't called and why I went back to class. I turned to the nurse and said, "She told me there was nothing wrong and that she wouldn't call you and to go back to class." My mom lost it. She screamed at the nurse, who only said, "I don't have x-ray vision. How would I have known?" Screamed at the principal and took me to an emergency doctor appointment. Family doctor did x-rays and said I would have to go to the specialist in the morning because it was so swollen it looked like multiple fractures in both wrists, so he could not cast them. I had to endure another ride home and all night with Tylenol as my only pain meds and bags of veggies on my wrists throughout the night. Go to the specialist who looked at both wrists, took more x-rays, and came in asking what color I wanted my casts, since both wrists were broken and along the growth plate, so maybe permanent weakness and or pain for the rest of my life. Mother raised heck, sued the school. They refused to pay any expenses and said to sue them, demanded the nurse be fired. She was, and when the school was going to make me retake gym the next year and fail this year, she said no way was I being punished for their ineptitude. So that's the story of how I owned my school because of a stupid nurse and the refusal to call my mother. Just another customer who refuses to take no for an answer. I had the pleasure of fielding a phone call from a customer who refused to understand that what he was asking for simply wasn't possible. Customer: "Hi, I was in your store yesterday and saw this hat I liked, but you didn't have it in black. I was wondering if you could order it into the store so I could buy it." Me: "Let me check our inventory system right now. If we have it in one of our distribution centers or another store, we could absolutely place an order for you and have you pick it up at our store." I checked and we didn't carry the hat in black at all. To be clear, it wasn't that it was sold out or currently unavailable or anything like that. We just didn't carry that product in black. Never had and had no plans to do so. Me: "Hi there. I just checked and it looks like we don't carry that style in black. So unfortunately, I can't order it into the store for you." Him: "Really? But black is such a popular color. Why don't you have it in black?" Me: "I agree, it is a very popular color, but we just don't sell that style in black at all. Very sorry about that." Him: "But the company that makes the hat sells it in black on their website." Me: "I understand. We don't sell that hat in black, but if you want to, you could buy it from that company directly." Him: "Your store had a better price for it. I'd really prefer to buy it from you if you could order it in." So not only does he want us to order this item in for him and him alone, he also wants us to sell it to him at a discounted price. Me. Right. The thing is, if we as a store were out of stock, but we carried it as a chain, I could order it in for you. But since we don't carry it at all, I have no way to order it for you. Him. You couldn't just order one in for me? I'm a loyal customer. I bought something the last time I was in. Me. Unfortunately, we just don't have that style in black in our system at all. There's no way to order it in, and in terms of distribution, we can't place orders for just one item. Here's where I started getting really frustrated with his refusal to accept that what he was asking for just wasn't possible. Him. Well, what if you order a few in? Me. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you. I don't control our distribution or what products we stock. Him. Well then, can I speak to your manager? I'm sure he'd be happy to order in a product for a loyal customer. At this point, I'm happy to have an out from this conversation, even if it means potentially annoying my manager with a frivolous phone call. Me. Sure thing. I'll put your call through to him. It'll just be a moment. Him. Actually, can you put me on hold and lay some groundwork with your manager? Let him know I'm a loyal customer. I just bought something recently. I really want to buy this hat through you. And then, when you have him on my side, then can you put the call through? Me. I'm going to connect you to my manager now. What I didn't tell him was this. I'm definitely going to lay some groundwork with my manager in terms of apologizing for sending him this call and letting him know how persistent and annoying you've been up until now. My manager took the call, came up a few minutes later and just said, "Don't worry about it. He understands he's not getting the hat through us." If I had to do over, I would have been more brief and just let him know it wasn't possible and then hung up on him. It's still crazy just how far people will push it to get things exactly how they want them. Entitled Dad takes my 3,000 euro guitar. March 2019. I used to play guitar for many years. I started when I was about 6 or 7 and had to quit after my 3rd year of university, since Italian law school is extremely hard. Now that I finally graduated, I decided to start playing again. When I quit, I sold or gave away many of my guitars, keeping just my first one as a memory of my granddad, who I lost 2 years ago. So, first things first, I looked for a good instrument. Since I couldn't find one, I wanted an 8-string guitar, since I usually play really heavy stuff. I ended up with a luthier custom-made beast. Since I also found a really well-paying job, I decided to treat myself, as I never had good instruments, and this is the very first one I've ever bought that cost more than $200 or $300. It was a dream come true. Fast forward a bit. January 2020. I was at this shop, which is also renowned for being really good with setups, and of course, I brought my guitar with me so that they could take a closer look and inspect it. I was at the shop's counter for maybe over an hour, since most of the employees are my friends, and we started talking about stuff like how we were doing, news, albums, etc. Also, it took them some time to give me an answer about my setup, since I had really specific requests. Introduce Poor Kid and Entitled Dad. While the kid started looking around with his eyes shining, his dad immediately started complaining about, "Where the heck is everyone here? I have a job, and I can't waste my time like this." I was minding my own business on my phone when I felt someone tapping at my back. It was Poor Kid. "Excuse me, sir, can I look at your guitar?" I put away my phone and said, "Of course," and took a step back. He was amazed and started asking questions about it, like why does it have 8 strings? What do I play? What's my favorite band, etc. He then thanks me and gets back to the guitars he was looking at. As the kid goes away, his father comes to me with an annoyed face. "Hey there, that's a nice guitar you have." "Thanks, sir. So, is your son buying his first one?" His son was probably about 10. "Yeah, but these ones cost too much, and I saw he liked yours. How much did you pay for it?" "Well, I won't be suggesting you to buy an instrument like this as his first one. This guitar is a custom handmade one. It was pretty expensive." "Like 400 euro? "No, actually, I paid a bit more, like 3,000 euro. "Don't lie. There is no way a piece of wood can cost that much money. I'll give you 90 for it." "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. I said 90 euro for your guitar." I was shocked. I never had to face an entitled dad before, and I was literally speechless. Okay, I'll give you €100, but nothing more than that. Sorry, but it's not for sale. And even if it was, I could never sell it for, what, 1/30th of its price? Now you're just being mean. It's for my kid. Can't you do something nice and sell it to him? No, this is my first good guitar, and there are literally hundreds of them here. I'm sure you can find something he likes that you can afford. But he likes yours. And as he said that, he started trying to reach for it. I blocked his arm without hurting him. My guitar has a really thin neck, and it can be damaged or even snapped if handled carelessly. What are you doing? Come on, be a grown man. If you bought it once, you can buy it another time. Absolutely no. Please, sir, stop harassing me or I'll call the owners. He burst into a laugh before starting screaming how I was supposed to give it to him, that he knew the owner of the shop, who was one of his closest friends, and that he would call the police because I assaulted him when I grabbed his arm. The poor kid came close to us, looking deluded at his father, saying that he was embarrassing him and stopped doing what he was trying to do, and that he always did that. The entitled dad looked at his son with anger and yelled to him, "Go away and look at those stupid guitars." By that time, the cashier and the owner were back, since they probably heard the commotion. Is there something wrong here? As I was saying no, the entitled father started ranting about me being mean to both him and his son, that I had assaulted him, and that now he demanded me give him my instrument. Otherwise, he would have to call the cops on both me and the owner. I was so confused that I couldn't even understand how furious I was at that point. The owner looked at him, and when entitled dad finally finished with his nonsense, turned to me. Was he really trying to take your instrument, OP? Well, yes, but I stopped him because I was worried he would have taken it from the neck, damaging it. Sir, we have cameras everywhere. I know OP, and he would never do such things. I ask you and your son to leave, or we'll have to call the police. You can't do that. I was assaulted. The owner clearly had enough of that, so he took out his phone and started dialing for help. The dad went to grab his kid and stormed out of the shop, yelling how incompetent the owner was, how I had been a horrible person, and many other funny things I can't report. I felt bad for his son though. He was really kind, and I saw how he would have liked a brand new guitar to start playing, so I run after them, and ignoring the father, I asked the kid if he wanted an instrument. He was crying, but as I asked him that, he gave me a smile as bright as the sun. He went back, spent a good hour while his dad was waiting by the entrance, trying different guitars, and he ended up choosing a Fender all-in-one pack, since he would have needed an amp as well. I understood that his father was not going to be able to afford it, and I decided to buy it for him myself. He was the happiest kid I've ever seen. He and his dad got out of the shop, and I was finally able to get all the details about the work I wanted to be done on my rig, paid my deposit, and of course, bought some picks. When I finally got out from the shop 10 minutes later, I noticed that the dad was waiting outside. His eyes were red, and he started apologizing for his behavior. He explained to me how he used to work for a construction company, but he eventually got fired as the company declared bankruptcy. My granddad runs his own construction company, so I knew the one he was talking about. Pretty nasty stuff. Manager caught stealing profits, unpaid shifts and work days, forced closure, no liquidation whatsoever. Judges even took some money from the workers to pay for the debts the managers made. There were no doubts why this man was having his way more than fair share of BS. He kept thanking me for what I had done, that he was feeling horrible, and how his son was absolutely loving his brand new instrument. The three of us went to a bar and had a coffee and chatted for a bit. At the end of the day, the entitled dad was really just a parent struggling to get by month to month. I know what it feels like. I've been through some stuff myself, and I know how you can end up being a total jerk when you see no way out of your situation. I'm glad that it all sorted itself out in the end. They were genuine and good people, just having a rough time, and I couldn't be happier knowing that maybe I bought the next Steve Vai's first guitar. My grandma started nasty rumors about me in school. My grandma is an interesting individual. One may place her in the Karen category. She's from a small town where you're either very well off and waspy, or you do drugs and live in an old school made into an apartment building. She's on the waspy side, knows everything and everyone, always will find something about you to nitpick at. Fun times. The best time was 8th grade. She was a math teacher in my school for junior high. Oh boy, was that a dandy time. Because I was her granddaughter, she put a huge target on me. Every day she would watch me like a hawk and wait for the split second that I would look away, then shout, OP, pay attention. Don't make me tell your mother you're goofing off in my class. And the whole class would giggle. She would grin, and her ego would inflate like swimming shorts when you first walk into the water. One time, I accidentally wore slippers to school, and for the rest of the year, she would bring it up like, "Can you not remember the equation, like you couldn't remember your shoes?" Cue malicious grins and laughter. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when I got a boyfriend. Bit of backstory here. I was held back in kindergarten, so I'm a year older than everyone in my 8th grade class. I was dating a guy in 10th grade, but he skipped ahead a grade, so he was actually a year younger than his 10th grade class. This made our age difference to be only about a year apart. However, from an outside perspective, when you first hear about the age difference, I'm sure your first reaction would be like, ew. And boy, did my grandma eat that up like it was her very last meal. Anytime we would visit, she would make side comments like, "We knew OP prefers older men, right OP?" Or, "If it was my kid, I certainly wouldn't approve, but I guess times are a little different." It was annoying, but it wasn't interfering with my life. That is, until she started to gossip about me to other teachers. She would tell them that I was sneaking around with my boyfriend, that I was going into teachers' lounges and bathrooms with him. She also heavily implied my parents were against all of this. For context, my parents knew how old we both were and actually aren't crazy. Also, my boyfriend was the quietest, nerdiest kid in his grade. It took us both 2 weeks of holding hands before we even kissed, so none of this was true. But that didn't stop the rumors. During lunch, I'd get asked by girls if it was true I had done these things. If I was in class and I would ask a teacher to use the restroom, they would refuse. If they did let me go, they would interrogate me for several minutes first to make sure I wasn't sneaking off to do anything with my boyfriend. Before any of this, I was literally a fly on the wall, and I was completely fine with that. Now, I was miserable and felt completely helpless. After coming home crying for who knows how many days in a row, my mom got fed up. I remember her screaming, "That's it!" grabbing her keys and storming out the door. When she returned, she said that grandma wouldn't be bothering me anymore. Once I got older, she told me a brief summary of what had happened. Basically, my mom arrived and approached her calmly, explaining to her that I was her child and she has control of the situation. She even explained the age difference. After asking her politely to back off and stop telling lies to coworkers, my teachers, grandma scoffed and said, "You don't know what she could be doing behind closed doors. I'm just keeping an eye out for her." This set my mom off. She told me that she started yelling at my grandma about the shaming she was doing of her own granddaughter and how miserable I was because of it. She said she has no right to say or do any of this, and what she was doing was cruel and inappropriate. My grandma's response? "How dare you enter my home and accuse me of this? Get out of my house." So my mom left. The next day, my grandma avoided eye contact with me. She didn't even try to call on me for answers or point out what kind of clothes I was wearing. She just averted her gaze and did her job finely. Rumors continued just for a little bit, but then people caught on that it really wasn't as scandalous as the rumors portrayed, and we were left alone. How did all this end? Like you would expect. Grandma acts like it never happened, never brings it up, avoids the conversations if they're around the time when she taught me. It's irritating, but at the same time, it's expected. Now that I'm an adult and we are all aware of her silly ways, we can just smile and nod until we go home, where we then rant about her and how mean she was during dinner. I have so many more Karen-like stories involving her if anyone is interested. Have you ever had someone spreading rumors about you? If so, what did you do about it? Please let us know.
Hey, Mr. Reddit, I heard the person watching this didn't even smash that like button.
Refuse to upgrade my PC to properly do my job? Okay, I'll make you watch me work. I run the parts room at an independently owned auto body and collision repair shop. We'll call the owners Mr. and Mrs. Bossman. We do mostly insurance repairs and always have between 20 to 50 vehicles on property in various states of repair, depending on how busy we are. Once the estimate for a specific vehicle is approved, my job is primarily to order all the parts for the repair, track and receive and organize all the parts for all ongoing repairs as they arrive, input the invoicing and process any returns for wrong/damage/unnecessary parts and such, plus IT work, because I'm apparently the only person there who knows that you can just Google a problem and someone has usually already posted the answer on a message board from 6 years ago. I complain a lot, but in actuality, I very much like my job, and I've become exceedingly good at it over the years. My coworkers are generally pretty great. There's almost no office drama. I don't usually deal with the general public, and the owners are mostly solid bosses, a husband and wife team. Mr. Bossman runs the day-to-day shop, and he is there on site pretty much every day, while Mrs. Bossman comes in periodically to do the books, which she watches like a hawk. Mr. Bossman is a decent guy so far as bosses go, but Mrs. Bossman is great. She's just one of those high personality types who's all peaches and sunshine and rainbows 90% of the time, right up until the moment something doesn't go entirely her way, at which point she drops the smile and becomes the stubbornest, immovable object you've ever butted heads against. May God help you if you actually anger her. She's not a Karen in the slightest, she's just an elemental force of nature, and you can bend like the reed or break like the twig. So I deal with Mr. Bossman on a daily basis and only deal with Mrs. Bossman a few times a week when she needs something for accounting. My default work ethic used to be set to sack of potatoes, but that doesn't fly with the Bossmans, and especially not Mrs. Bossman. I have learned the hard way to be very, very proactive in my duties, which is directly why I'm now a great parts guy. Didn't take long to find out that it's just far easier and safer to be able to redirect the coming storm with knowledge and paper trails than it is to face the fury head-on with laziness and ignorance. She always says, the 3 most important rules to follow in the industry are 1. Cover yourself, 2. Cover yourself, and 3. Cover yourself. To which I'd add a 4th rule. Always send an email beginning with, per our phone call, I'd just like to remind you. Always have an email saved me so many times. Becomes relevant later. And she loves me because I have become exceedingly excellent at making her job easier through diligent bookkeeping. As you also might imagine, doing all this ordering and invoicing and emailing and such demands heavy use of a computer. And for years, I had to make do with one that was never built nor intended for the task. It wasn't even very old, just an underpowered tablet-style budget computer originally only meant for the shop foreman to occasionally check estimates. At any given time, I had to run our estimating software plus 2 to 4 price matching programs and their accompanying background scanning programs, plus multiple Chrome windows for email and parts vendors and part finder websites, plus image software to view repair photos or edit diagrams to email back and forth. The budget computer had 2 gigs of RAM and a dual-core 1.3 gigahertz processor. It could barely handle running Notepad if you had the main estimating software running, and it made my job painfully slow even at the best of times. For 4 years, I'd mention it to Mrs. Bossman, and it was always, oh right, I keep meaning to look into that, and then nothing. But that was better than bringing it up with Mr. Bossman. Mr. Bossman was a former repair technician before they opened their own shop together, so anything on the office end is already good enough until it breaks and is not worth wasting any more money on in his eyes. All his upgrades should be on the production side of the shop, since that's what he knows well. She's much more practical about office upgrades, thankfully. Anytime I'd mention how slow my computer was and how much it was slowing down my work, he'd just laugh it off and say, "It does the job, don't it?" and walk away far too pleased with himself. Mrs. Bossman had been going back and forth with a specific vendor that was arguing against some outstanding credits and unpaid invoices that didn't match our numbers, which means they don't match my numbers. So she came into my office to ask me to look into them as normal. But today is not normal. It's especially busy, and I'm already a day behind where I should be. Cue malicious compliance. This time I decided that unlike normal, my workload was light enough. That I totally had the time right then and there and could look them up for her right on the spot instead of bringing her the files later that day. This seemed urgent after all. So I began searching our database for the problem invoices and very deliberately and thoroughly went through every program I possibly could, opening every estimate and reconciliation and digital footprint to pull up any scrap of even slightly relevant information for her, so that she had all the relevant info to argue with the vendor. Each new screen freezing and pausing and loading anew. Each new refresh taking more of those long form time dilated seconds to complete. Those seconds that drag on and on and on like waiting for a traffic light to turn. I was just being properly diligent. You must understand. Oh, here it is, I'd say in the most matter-of-fact, perfectly normal, everything is fine in standard and typical voice. Yeah, that part was returned back on... Oh, let me pull up the credit memo. Oh, actually, that just shows when I generated the return, but not when the vendor actually took it back. Actually, I remember this one now. The driver didn't leave a return confirmation slip, so I think I sent the vendor a reminder email about this. Let me pull that up. Oh, yes. I told them about this issue 2 months ago. And oh, this is a follow-up email that was part of another chain. Let me forward you both of these. And actually, I think I can still pull up the estimate here since it has the full reconciliation. Uh-oh. I hope it didn't freeze completely. Just wait a sec and it usually catches back up. She kept her smile up, but I could tell it had shifted and she was getting annoyed. Does it always take you this long to look up the invoices? I could tell she was getting really impatient, but she couldn't say anything about it since I was doing exactly what she had asked of me. And she does normally love that I'm this thorough, as long as she's not waiting in real time. Huh? Oh yeah, this is normally like this, I said casually. It's kind of frustrating sometimes, but Mr. Bossman doesn't want to buy another computer since this one does technically do everything I need it to do. Perfectly innocent moon eyes. It doesn't slow me down too much. Not usually. Blink, blink, puppy dog face. I continued doing this for all 5 or so problem invoices, and honestly, it was a 100% typical thing to look up, and really only took maybe 15 minutes total in the end. The only difference was making a big show of it while intentionally making it look like I wasn't making a show of it. But that was enough. Well, I really think we need to look into getting you a new computer. This can't be good for production turnarounds if it's always been this slow. Huge success. Storm of Fury successfully redirected from self to vendor, armed with time-stamped acknowledgments for every rogue charge, and finally knowing the crap I have to sit through each and every time I double-click. With all the invoices and credits properly tracked on our end, vendor's accounting had to admit the mistake had been on their end, and we had been billed in the error. I'm not always right, but even when I'm wrong, I can usually pull up a time-dated email to make it look like I wasn't wrong. Bend a little, and the hurricane may just pass you by for a less prepared target. She waited a few weeks to find a good deal, but sure enough, I had a new computer shortly thereafter that is much more capable of running everything I need to run without derping out on me, and it's been an absolute champion. Decided to write this because it's been almost exactly 2 years working on the new machine that's still going strong, and I just today got an unrequested raise for good performance, so I'm feeling overly pleased with myself. Speaking of computers, do you have a fast computer or a slow one? Please let us know.
My Windows 95 works just fine.
Entitled sister talks crap behind my back, throws a fit when I won't buy her stuff anymore. My sister smokes. Not great to start with. On top of this, she smokes very expensive cigarettes. Each pack is almost $10, which I didn't really care about before when she had a job, because how she spends her paycheck, the parts not being used to care for her kids anyways, isn't really my business. But she quit her job. Yeah, during everything going on right now, a month or so ago, because she, and I quote,
doesn't want to deal with that crappy boss of mine anymore,
and was coasting on the money she had saved. Well, now she's run out of money. Shocker. And instead of looking for another job, she's instead going to try selling her car. But in the meantime, she's broke with no way to buy cigarettes. I don't smoke, so she can't bum anything off of me, but our mom does, so sis could technically bum a couple off of her, but she doesn't because my mom smokes those cheap, crappy ones. No, she wants her brand. She's never heard the term beggars can't be choosers, it seems. So she's been in a crappy mood for a full week because she can't afford her expensive cigarettes, won't accept any cheap ones, and none of us are coughing up $10 to buy her a pack she'll blow through in maybe a week. But today I'd had enough of her crappy attitude and decided to do her a favor. I said if she would go through the Place A drive-thru for me so I could get us all some food, her kids included, then I'd help her get some gas and a pack of cigarettes. She eagerly agreed, but rejected my offer to get her any food. And Place A wasn't open yet. It was like 9:30 a.m. and they opened after 10, so she'd have to wait till they opened. Then she sort of paused and asked if I really wanted food from Place A and not Place B, which is closer. Place B is legit right next to the gas station, while Place A is maybe 2 buildings down, so still very close. I say no, I've been craving something specific from Place A, so she relents and says okay, and that she's gonna be sitting outside drinking coffee until then. So maybe 20 minutes go by, and I go out to give sis a written list of what to get, cause she has a not great memory and will forget stuff. And I get close to the side porch door, which is open, and hear her complaining about having to go through the drive-thru for me to our mom. Just how I'm so rude for asking her to drive so far, and how food from Place A is just so gross, and how she didn't even want to do this anyways. Well, I heard our mom tell her to be grateful because nobody else was offering to buy her food, gas, and her fancy cigs. Well, sis scoffed and started saying something else, but I walked outside and she shut up. Mom and her had wide-eyed looks, but I reached down and plucked my card, which she was gonna use to get everything, from her hand and just said, "Never mind, I don't want to burden you. I'll order through DoorDash instead," then walked back inside. She tried to call me back and say she was just messing around, but I ignored her. And when it was made clear I wasn't buying her crap or coming back, I heard her throwing a huge baby fit and our mom laughing and telling her that she did this to herself by being ungrateful. So yeah, sis threw her fit and wore herself out before going and sitting in her car for a few hours to pout. I really had no issue helping her if she did a little favor for me in return, but I'm not going to help anyone who complains about said help behind my back. Have you ever tried to help someone and they ended up being completely ungrateful? Please let us know. Office thermostat must be left at 16 Celsius? My boss was brought up in a household where the solution to being cold was putting another jumper on, to the extent the inside of the house used to freeze. Lord knows how many times I've heard that story. Unfortunately, instead of reveling in the marvel that is central heating, my boss feels it necessary to impose the same draconian rules straight from the 18th century on all of us in the office. In a word, it gets cold at work. For context, I work in a converted barn which is both poorly insulated and has a tall vaulted roof. This means any heat dissipates upwards and the building generally needs a lot of heat to stay comfortable. It's not uncommon to be sat indoors wearing my small down jacket and thermal base layers to keep warm. If I was working outside, I could accept this, but in an office environment, it's unnecessary. To make matters worse, I suffer from Raynaud's, which has been getting worse for the last few years. My condition makes it really rather miserable to sit at work for 8 hours with numb fingers and toes, all because of the lack of proper heating in the middle of winter. I am a long-standing employee, but in all my time working for my company, there's always been another colleague with a far more vocal opinion about how warm the office should be. For the last few years, for instance, a colleague of mine would make a big parade about cranking the heating up to 24 Celsius multiple times a day. This resulted in a daily problem between my colleagues and boss. Typically, my boss would see the thermostat, exclaim it's too hot, and switch the boiler off at the mains. No heat. I tried in vain to convince my colleague to leave the heating at a reasonable level, say 19 or 20 degrees Celsius, as I was certain my boss was unable to actually tell the heating was set higher than his preferred 15 Celsius, unless he could visually see the stat set higher. I was ignored and it continued, and so did the cold. Roll forward a few years. I'm now the only person left in the office other than my boss, his son, and an administrator who works part-time. The temperature has started to drop and the cold has been drawing in. The heating was switched on by Monday this week, and like clockwork, it was set on 15 degrees Celsius. I decided enough was enough and sat down with my boss to discuss the heating. I explained how cold temperatures affect my Raynaud's and asked if he would be willing to increase the thermostat. Surprisingly, my boss was pretty compassionate and promised to increase the heating starting the very next day. True to his word, my boss did increase the thermostat by 1 degree. Apparently, 16 degrees Celsius was his limit. To say I was livid was an understatement, but more disheartening was looking towards another winter shivering at my keyboard. I couldn't stand the thought, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. 2 really important bits of information popped into my head that morning that formed the perfect plot in an instant. 1. The thermostat was old school, analog, not digital. 2. My boss and his son were out at a meeting for the whole afternoon and the admin wasn't doing it all. Roll on to lunchtime. I took it upon myself to research the model of thermostat. I found an archived manual online. Page 3, calibration. I couldn't believe how simple it was to adjust the unit. There was one screw to remove the outer casing which exposed the dial. The dial then simply lifts off the spindle and is rotated and reinserted onto the spindle to calibrate the unit. Armed with my Swiss Army knife, once I was alone in the office, I got to work. Disassembling the unit, I rotated the spindle clockwise by 4 degrees. So now, when set at 16 Celsius, the thermostat would actually measure 20 Celsius. I replaced the casing, and using a relative humidity meter we use for work, I tested the switching point of the stat. The office measured at 16.2 Celsius, and the stat clicked on at around 12. The office measured at 16.2 degrees Celsius, and the stat clicked on around 12 Celsius. Hearing the boiler fire in the kitchen gave me the biggest grin I've had in ages. That was on Tuesday. The remainder of the week has been glorious. For the first time in 8 years, the office is actually at a constant, comfortable temperature. I had been waiting to post this in line with the rules as no fallout had occurred. However, this afternoon, my boss asked if I was warm enough. Again, unusually compassionate. While I felt kind of bad to go behind his back, it does give me a scope to increase the heating even more when it starts getting really cold in the next few months. I was also pretty ecstatic as it proved the hunch I have had for years. My boss has had no idea if the heating is set warmer other than the number shown on the stat. So, an all-out win for my bid of malicious compliance. Speaking of thermostats, what do you like to set your thermostat on? Please let us know.
I leave it on 60 all year round. So nice.
Am I the jerk for refusing to let my sister-in-law move into my home temporarily? My husband is deployed and has been gone for almost 11 months. We have a 3-year-old daughter and a 14-month-old son. My sister-in-law, 43, has an 11-year-old daughter who she allows to run amok. Last month, she asked her best friend to move in with her to help her pay bills, and this sparked an affair between her husband and said friend. I feel bad for her, I really do, but there are many reasons why I don't want her to move in. The biggest one, she now calls me to tell me all the time that men are pigs and that my husband is probably cheating on me. Mind you, this is her brother. She doesn't have a job and refuses to get one. She has not worked in 16 years. Her daughter has literally no discipline, and every time they have visited, she's left my home in complete shambles with my kids' toys broken and damaged. Her daughter also lies like a rug, and she just laughs it off and says that it isn't a big deal. Example, her daughter drew all over my spreadsheet for work that was completely finished and due the very next morning. I didn't have time to make another one and had to spend several hours trying to use whiteout. She even wrote her name on it. The kid outright denied it and tried blaming my oldest, who only scribbles. Her mom said,
She said she didn't do it, and I'm not going to break her spirit simply because she drew on something. Put your stuff up for safekeeping next time you invite us for a visit.
I did not invite her. She showed up unannounced. She always says things like,
What are you getting your favorite sister-in-law for her birthday?
Or,
Since you love me so much, you should buy me this.
Anyways, I just can't do it. So she asked last week, or rather told me,
Well, it's final. Greg and I are over. Teresa and I are going to come crash at your place.
Literally, like an outright demand as if I owe her. So I said, No, you're not. She freaked out and asked me why, and I was completely honest with her, down to every last detail. I simply don't have enough patience, and I don't want her in my house while I'm not there to make sure her daughter doesn't destroy my house. My husband called and I told him what happened. He said, You told her no, right? So he's 100% behind me on this. But my brother-in-law is saying that I'm a stupid jerk for not being more understanding because her husband cheated and staying in the house with him and his mistress is going to cause a mental plummet. Am I the jerk? She can't afford to go anywhere else, and no one has room to house her. Well, what do you think? Should OP let her sister-in-law move in or not? Please let us know.
I'd put a doghouse in the back for them.
Entitled parent wants free classes when his son messed up. Cast. We've got me, my mom, entitled dad, and entitled kid. Backstory. My mom runs a learning center similar to Kumon, where every week a kid would get a booklet to fill out. However, the parents of these kids are very much grade-driven and also very, very cheap. This leads to a lot of entitled dad and entitled mom encounters. Story. Entitled dad comes in with entitled kid into my mom's office, and I'm sitting there trying to finish some schoolwork. Entitled dad. Why are entitled kids' grades not improving, huh? We've been coming here for months, and still no improvement. Mom, coolly. Well, let's sort this out one by one. Mom pulls out entitled kid's file to see what's happening. Mom, while reading the file. So, have you been having any difficulties in school or while completing your assigned booklets? Entitled kid. No. Mom. Well, that is interesting because my file shows that when we access you on each booklet after you have completed it, it shows that you've been getting multiple questions wrong, and many parts of your booklet are not even completed. Entitled dad interjects. So what? It's your job to make sure entitled kid completes his booklet, not mine. Mom. Well, when you enrolled entitled kid into this program, you signed a form saying that you and entitled kid would have a responsibility to make sure that you complete the booklet. Entitled dad, ignoring what was just said in order to not take responsibility. Well, why is he doing so bad, huh? If this is not fixed, I will start dropping entitled kid off at this learning center. Mom, we are happy to tutor him more, but you will have to pay extra. Pay? Why should we pay? Like heck we're going to pay. Mom, well, you will either have to pay for extra classes or you will have to get to the bottom of this. However, I did notice that it seems that he's forgetting what he has previously learned, according to his new file. Now, do you still have the previous booklets? Because the form you signed says that entitled kid should review the previous booklets even if he has completed in order to make sure he doesn't forget anything. Entitled kid.
Well, I threw them out because I don't need them anymore.
Entitled dad realizes he's in the wrong and just leaves with entitled kid without saying anything. Me. What an idiot. Mom. The one thing I don't miss from my days as a computer scientist is not having to deal with the customers. Entitled aunt demanded I give away my $5,000 Lego collection because I'm too old to own Legos. Cast. We've got me, we've got my mom, we've got entitled aunt, entitled son, and uncle. A bit of info before we get to the story. My parents introduced me to Legos when I was 5 years old. It was a Lego Technic, and I successfully built it for the first time. My interest in Lego Technic grew ever since, and I started doing the harder Lego sets, and I really enjoyed it. It was in 2018. My grandmother had just passed away, and my family held a meeting with our extended family at our house. The house was packed since our home is not that huge. Then my entitled aunt and her entitled son and husband came to our house. Everyone in my family dislikes her very much because she's never respected her own parents, and she has a disgusting attitude. Everyone avoided her, but my mom approached her. My mom was confused because she hadn't sent an invitation to her. My mom asked her why, and she answered,
I came here for the inheritance.
The room went silent, and my mom was in shock of her reasoning. Enter entitled son. He was 7 years old and went to the living room playing with other kids. I locked my room because he entered in my room once and he dropped some of my Legos to the ground, breaking them. Then I built them back again eventually. I didn't trust entitled son to come into my room as these Legos took me days to build a single set and I don't want to get them smashed on the ground. Shouting started in the living room by entitled aunt and my uncle because
I deserve to claim all the inheritance, and only me.
This turned into a fight between the siblings, and I was scared and not used to hearing shouting, and so I went to my room to take a break. As I was heading to my room, entitled son followed me, and I didn't notice at all until I reached for my door. He tried to sneak into the room, but I was able to stop him. He threw a fit and asked why I'm not letting him in. I told him my reasoning, and he answered back, "It was just an accident." This isn't actually the first time he dropped my Legos by accident. Hearing those words made my blood boil, and I told him he will not enter my room. His face was filled with anger, and he went back to his mom. I thought that was the end of it, and oh boy, was I wrong. I heard a knock on my door, and guess who it is? Of course, it's entitled aunt. She looks annoyed, and looking at me, the following conversation is what happened. Entitled aunt.
Why are you not letting my son enter your room?
Me. He's dropped my Legos several times, and I don't trust him in my room. Entitled aunt.
Oh, come on. It was just a mistake. Come on, entitled son, go in.
The audacity of my entitled aunt is unbelievable when I already told her no to multiple times and she went back to the living room. Entitled son.
Look, Legos. Can you give them to me, OP?
Me. What the heck? No! I spent a lot of money to buy this, and days to build these Lego sets, and years to collect them. I do not trust you with my Legos because I know you are not going to take good care of them. At this point, entitled son was angry and was about to throw a fit. He went to his mom again, and I cannot believe what he told her. Entitled aunt.
OP, you said you were going to give your Legos to entitled son?
Me. No, everything your son told you is a complete lie. Entitled aunt.
Just give him all your Legos. Besides, you're too old to own this anyway.
Me. No, I will not. This is your last warning, entitled aunt.
Ugh, get out of my way.
She then proceeds to push me away. I saw entitled aunt and entitled son trying to grab the bigger Lego sets on the shelf. I ran to them and took back my Legos safely away from them. Entitled aunt began to shout at me, telling me how stupid I am, and more insults from her. Apparently, her shouting could be heard from the living room, and my mom and uncle came in to check. I was about to tell them what happened, but entitled aunt cut me off. She told them her story, and my mom knew that it was a lie. Mom knew me, that I would not give away my Lego sets, and told entitled aunt to get out of the house. This made entitled aunt so mad that she decided to pull my shelf full of Legos to the ground. I was shocked, but my uncle quickly grabbed the shelf and held it to prevent entitled aunt from pulling it. My uncle is a huge and tall guy with a long beard and wanted entitled aunt to get out of the house and to never come back. Entitled Aunt was mad, and she pulled Entitled Son to the exit. I thanked my uncle for helping me, and at the same day, he bought me a Lego set, and I was very happy. To this day, everyone cut contact with Entitled Aunt, and we heard her husband divorced her. Her husband has a really good paying job, and he had enough crap with Entitled Aunt. Last time I saw her, she was living in a small apartment. Have you ever had a relative that you just couldn't stand? If so, what did they do? Please let us know.
I've got a co-host I can't stand.
Entitled Mother became enraged because our food program was canceled. Context: this woman has been a problem parent at the center for as long as her 5-year-old kid, Molly, has been there. The girl started as an infant in our baby room, so that's 5 years of this woman. This entitled mom is not a good person. She would not pack lunches for her daughter. She would often send her then 13-year-old to bring Molly into the daycare because she didn't want to. And at least 3 times a week, teachers had to give her kid a bath in the sink, and when she was too big for that, a sponge bath because she smelled so bad. Yes, we called CPS, and I'm not sure what came of that, but I know Molly is still in her custody. It was awful, but there was one saving grace this girl could look to: Jenny. Jenny was the sweetest woman you would ever meet. She worked in one of the preschool classrooms, but her heart was so big and open that she extended her kindness to all of the kids. Every time Molly came in without a lunch, Jenny would make sure she had food, even if it meant driving to the local Walmart or county fair to get her a sandwich. Eventually, Jenny began to bring in food personally for Molly because Molly's entitled mom never packed her lunch. Jenny passed away suddenly and unexpectedly in 2019. She was young, just barely over 30. Entitled mom kept bringing Molly in without lunches, and up until all the craziness started, it was an ongoing battle that finally came to a head yesterday. Molly came in at 10:30 schedule, which was too late for breakfast. In the preschool classrooms, we keep them on a schedule, and breakfast ends at 8:30, while they get snack at 10. Molly had a snack, and lunch started at noon. When the teacher opened her lunchbox to prep her food at lunch, she noticed there was breakfast in there. She decided, politely, to remind Molly's mother that breakfast ends at 8:30, and if she was planning to bring her in later, to please have her eat before she comes in, because things are already in full swing in the classroom. This was done via a child care app that we use to communicate with parents. Well, entitled mom did not like that and called the center screaming at our assistant director. This lasted for 10 minutes, and the pregnant assistant director came into my room, the infant room, angry about all this. She cooled down and went back to her office. The offices are right next to my room, so I was being somewhat nosy and listening in. Entitled mom came to pick Molly up, effectively pulling her away from the center. There, she got to shouting at the assistant director.
Wouldn't you be upset if they weren't feeding your baby? Wouldn't you want justice and people held accountable?
That's when the director stepped in and told the assistant director to check on the other classrooms. Translation: you don't have to listen to this. I'll handle it. Director then followed up with, personally, I would make sure that my kid ate breakfast before bringing them in. Assistant director left at that point. Entitled mom was throwing a fit about how she didn't like the teachers here, how she thought Tiana, the preschool teacher for the 4 and 5-year-olds, was a raging jerk, and how she didn't like her since the beginning, and how a lot of parents pulled their kids because of her. Thing is, she was confusing Tiana with Tessa, the younger preschool teacher for the 3 and 4-year-olds. Tessa is, admittedly, a strict woman, but her strictness was countered with kindness and positive reinforcement. Entitled mom is so out of touch with her daughter's providers that she never even got to meet Tiana. Finally, she delivered the zinger everyone knew was coming, but hoped she had enough class to refrain from saying.
You stopped doing the food program when Jenny died. I think you are just too selfish and cheap to honor her memory in continuing it.
To which director finally stood up and said, Jenny was the food program. She bought that food for Molly out of her own pocket, with her money that she earned caring for the kids here. The reason this so-called food program stopped is because Jenny passed away. To which entitled mom doubled down and said,
Well, why wouldn't you continue to buy food for the kids in her honor?
Director, because we do not have the budget to allocate funds for a food program. And in addition, in our handbook, it states we are only to provide snacks. We would need a whole other set of clearances and regulations to start serving food here like a cafeteria.
But you did it when Jenny was here.
The argument continued back and forth like that until finally, director basically said that this was the second outburst that entitled mom had, and that they could no longer accept Molly at the center with this continued behavior. Entitled mom, needing to get in the last word, finished with,
Fine, I don't want to send my kid to a place that starves her.
Then she left with Molly. My heart breaks for the kid, but there's not much else to do. I just can't believe how classless you have to be in one argument to bring up a beloved, saintly person like Jenny, and then basically insinuate that our wonderful assistant director was going to be a bad mother, while acting like we are still somehow the jerks for canceling our non-existent food program. Entitled mom freaks out because her kid can't pet my dog. This happened several years ago, and to date is the most abrasive interaction I have had with other folks in public regarding my service dog, who is now retired. We've got entitled mom, entitled kid, service dog, and me. I was maybe about 21 at the time and was in the beginning stages of really learning to be an adult on my own at the time. I had just moved out of my parents' house and into an apartment with a friend. Before this, I still lived at home with my parents and usually just went to school, work, and didn't often go places alone because I'm kind of a homebody. So between school, work, and the odd outing with my parents or friends, everyone usually around me was really respectful and familiar with my service dog and my general rules about her. I didn't have issues usually, and if I did, someone less anxious and more assertive was usually there to help me. This was no longer the case after I moved out. I was out and about running some errands on my own, which I was beginning to enjoy doing, with my service dog at my side. Along the way, I realized I hadn't eaten in a while and decided to stop at the food court of the mall I was in right then for something quick and tasty. I got my food, found a seat, and began to get my service dog focused and prepared to go through our usual process so I could get started on my meal. I'm not secretive or anything personally, and usually I'm down to discuss my dog and educate if I have the time or energy with someone who is polite and well-meaning. I have a really intense food allergy, so that's what she is for. She also knows how to bring me a handful of objects on command, like an EpiPen, inhaler, or just lay down next to me to give me access to meds carried on her harness. It's really important that she not be disturbed while I have her check things because a missed alert can be life or death for me, not to be dramatic or anything. Breathing tends to be important. So I'm about to go through the process of having my dog do a check for me when I see a kid making a beeline for my service dog. She is harnessed, clearly and boldly marked, and not facing this kid. That doesn't matter though, because the kid is clearly too young or excited to read. Entitled kid. Puppy! I placed a hand out instinctively, just in time to keep her from touching my dog, who is still set to do her check, thankfully. I try to be understanding with kids, but I have a few hard and fast rules. I never reward attempts to touch without asking. I will stop and thank polite kids though. Each situation usually gets a conversation from me about how important working dogs are. However, even with polite kids, I do not stop my dog mid-task for my own safety. Me. Oh no, honey, please don't touch the puppy. She has a really important job and she's working right now. This is usually a good enough explanation for most kids about 2 and up. Not this one though, because she immediately starts crying. I'm talking full-on pouring tears and a red face as she screams loudly in the busy food court. I looked around for a parent and locked eyes with a round, blonde woman who was apparently staring icy daggers at me. Entitled mom.
Why are you touching her?
Entitled kid.
Puppy! I want the puppy!
Entitled mom marches over to me from her table and demands that I just let her kid pet my dog. I could feel the heat on my neck. I was so embarrassed at all the staring faces. Me. I'm sorry, I really can't do that. This is my service dog and she's working right now. If I let her get distracted during her task, I can get really sick or even worse. Entitled mom.
Service dogs are for disabled people.
You obviously aren't blind and you don't look sick. Me. Thanks. That means she's doing a good job. Entitled mom.
What's wrong with you then? Just let her pet the dog.
The kid is carrying on incoherently during this exchange and has now thrown herself on the floor. My service dog is not engaging her, but is fond of kids, so she's looking at her with concern. I get more irritated because I will have to wait longer now to eat. Me. That's none of your business. Nobody is petting the dog. Can you please leave me alone? Your kid shouldn't be running at large dogs she doesn't know anyway. Entitled mom.
I bet you're just faking it. I don't think pit bulls can even be service dogs.
Me. Any breed can be a service dog, lady. Please go away and take your daughter with you. Entitled mom looks at me like I just slapped her in the face. She could tell I wasn't going to budge. She picked up the small screaming brat, walked back to her table and put her in a stroller. She gathered her stuff and left. I breathed a sigh of relief and decided to check my phone for a minute so my service dog could forget the ordeal and reset. I figured it was behind me and I could go back to what I was doing. Oh, how wrong I was. Just a few minutes later, I could hear the screech of an entitled mom heading back into battle. The kid was still crying, and this time she was accompanied by a security officer. Entitled mom.
There, that animal bit my baby.
My eyes probably looked like they were just going to fall out of my head. I knew people had weird hang-ups about breeds, but this lady had just been demanding her kid be allowed to pet my dog. I couldn't believe it. This particular security guard looked like he didn't want to be mediating between adults at all. He asked me if it was true, and I said of course it wasn't. I told him that the kid had run up to my dog and the mother was mad I wouldn't let my dog be pet. He asked if she was a service dog. I confirmed she was. He asked if she was trained to do a task to mitigate a disability. I confirmed she was. Entitled mom.
She's lying. That mutt bit my daughter and made her cry.
Entitled kid. Puppy! She's visibly reaching for the dog. The security guard is clearly having none of her crap at this point. My service dog is calmly sitting next to us during the whole ordeal, watching me. She doesn't exactly look vicious and is actually quite a sissy. At this point, a girl, nice girl, around my age chimes in. Nice girl. This lady and her kid were bothering OP. That kid was never bitten. You have cameras, right? The security guard confirms there are indeed cameras and says we will all need to follow him so he can check the footage due to the severity of the accusation. Security guard. Either I have to call animal control or the police. Harassing a service dog is a felony, and a dog biting a kid is a pretty big deal. Either way, someone is in trouble. Entitled mom looks panicked and started to backpedal and say she's willing to drop it and everyone can go their own way. Her precious baby is fine after all. Me. I'm not willing to drop it. You lied about me. Let's go. 3 more security guards show up, and we all get escorted to the security office. Sure enough, the footage shows that the kid never even got within arm's reach of my dog, and entitled mom was harassing us. They ask me if I want to press charges, and I say that I do. Police show up within a few minutes, and I happen to know one of the officers because he's my ex-boyfriend's dad. We split up amicably before we graduated in high school. He knows me, he knows my dog, he loves my dog, and has said she's one of the best trained dogs he's ever met. I usually wouldn't be petty, but I excitedly greet him. He smiles and asks if it's okay to pet service dog at the moment. I thank him for asking permission and say of course. Entitled mom looks at me like she could just throw something. The other officer takes my statement. In the end, the officers see the footage, entitled mom gets arrested, and extra charges thrown on for resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. It was pretty wild, and my first real experience with entitled people on my own. The charge for harassing my service dog ended up getting dropped, but the other 2 charges stuck. I didn't care too much about that, but hopefully she learned a lesson. I also did eventually get to eat. Speaking of dogs, what's your favorite breed of dog of all time? Please let us know.
Rottweilers for the win.
Yes, you bought the house, but we can stay in it, right? So, not my story, but my brother's. My brother and his wife were moving from one state to another, and one of those states was Texas, so it was not a one-day move, if that makes sense. They had gone house hunting, found a place, one that needed a little TLC, updating since the owners were 70+ years old. But since they're both great DIYers, it was worth it for them to buy it cheap and improve it. They drive and get into a hotel in town the night before closing, late, with a U-Haul full of all their stuff. They arranged with U-Haul to have people there to unload at noon the next day, after closing. This is important. The next morning, they go to the walkthrough before closing, and the house is not packed up. As in, it looks like people are still living there. The realtor drops that the current owner might not be ready to give up possession at closing. For brother, this was a no-go. They didn't have the hotel for another night, and they had already arranged and paid for people to help unload. So no, contractually, the current owner needed to be out. They go to closing, and the realtor for the current owner says that the current owner needs to stay in the house again overnight. Again, from my brother, no. It's not arranged in our contract, we only had the hotel for one night, and I have the unloaders scheduled. The current owner's realtor.
Well, in my day, we just sorted this stuff out. It didn't need to be in a contract.
Brother. Okay, when were you going to tell us? At this point, it's too late. We made plans based on taking possession today. So unless your client will pay to reschedule the unloaders, pay for another night in a hotel, and with a pet deposit since they have 2 dogs, this won't work. This is why it's contracted, so that I can do things like not drive down here until the house is move-in ready. Come to find out that the current owner's realtor is no longer practicing, as in was retired but came out of retirement to do this for current owner. So closing proceeds, and my brother and his wife go to what should be their house. Current owner and all their kids and kids' spouses are there just hanging out. Not packing, not getting things out, just chilling. Brother. So can I help you with anything? Crew. Nah, we're good. They resume chatting. Repeat this every 15 minutes for about an hour and a half including my brother adding that he has people coming at noon to help him unload. At 11, they tell my brother that they're ordering a pizza. Does he want some? Brother: no, I do not want pizza. I'm celiac and can't eat pizza. However, I do need you to get your things out so I can move into my house. The pizza arrives and they continue to offer him more. At 11:30, he finally loses it. Brother: no, I don't want pizza. I need your U-Haul out of the driveway in half an hour because I will be moving my U-Haul into my driveway to unload my things into my house. They finally caught a clue. Cute chickens running with their heads off for the next half hour, during which my sister-in-law brings the dogs in. Wife of formerly current, now previous owner.
You can't bring dogs in here? I'm allergic.
Sister-in-law: yes, I can bring my dogs into my house. And you had no problem getting gluten-filled pizza all over my house when my husband told you that it makes him very sick. Wife:
Well, what about the floors?
Sister-in-law: yes, what about my floors? This is our house now. You need to leave. They finally got their stuff and left. But I figured this was a perfect example of very entitled people. Well, at least they offered him pizza. Speaking of pizza, what's your favorite place to get pizza from? Please let us know.
Little Caesars or Pizza Hut, one of those two.
Entitled ex-friend is upset about me getting a job in our field. Dave, 35 male, and I, 25 female, met in an advanced math class at community college 3 years ago. I had finished my bachelor's and needed to take a couple extra classes to prep for my master's program in CS. Dave, as he came to share, had spent ages 18 to 28 playing video games in his childhood bedroom, and from 29 to 35, he had had an awakening and decided to start doing something with his life. He planned on getting his bachelor's in CS, but had somehow managed to spend 6+ years of taking part-time classes at the community college. The guy was 35, never had a job outside of one summer stocking at a grocery store a decade ago, never paid rent in his life either. When we met in that math class, despite his past, I was impressed with Dave for trying to turn his life around. The guy was smart, but over time I started seeing another side of him. Dave constantly complains about his parents, the same parents who pay his every expense, including a reloadable Starbucks card and an annual Disneyland membership, the latter of which he uses 2 to 3 times each week. Anytime I ever offered to help Dave get a good starting job in IT or CS, he'd laugh and say, "I couldn't possibly work, even part-time with my academic schedule," or $30 an hour? I'll be making 3 times that when I finish my degree. What makes him think that? His 3 months of job market experience from 2005? At the same time, he always went around saying he knew more than his professors did. He should just teach the class, etc. He'd tell everyone he's a computer scientist and a true academic. Well, this summer I got an internship turned job into a major tech and entertainment company. I am on track to finish my master's next year. The sad thing is, my friendship with Dave was over within 2 months of me getting this internship. He started calling me a sellout and saying things like working students didn't actually care about understanding computer science. They just lied and cheated to get through classes. Random crap like that. When I told him that wasn't true and that lots of students work, his response was to ignore me for a week and then write a 4-page letter saying I don't understand how hard he has it. The entitlement is mind-blowing for a near middle-aged man who has never supported himself to tell someone who worked their way through most college in retail and as a maid, who now works full-time and mentors kids in STEM while finishing a second degree, that she doesn't appreciate how hard he has it. Mind blown. Hope he's still having a good time spending 40 hours a week studying and being a computer scientist at Starbucks. Hey, speaking of Starbucks, what's your favorite thing to get when you go there? Please let us know.
Coconut frappuccino for the win, bruh.
Entitled mom uses my things for college for her advantage. My family friend, I'll call her my teacher, is an ex-cosmetologist and ex-beautician teacher and now owns several highly rated salons/spas, hair coloring, cutting, styling, manicures, pedicures, and makeup. She knew I wanted to also do those things, but I am currently going to college to become a music teacher. She decided since she has a salon near my college, she would teach me her old lessons / what was required to be taught on weekends after the shop closed, my days off, and afternoons in exchange for working reception and as her assistant, booking appointments, greeting, checking people in, grabbing things, and doing errands if needed. She also said when I got my license, she would hire me there so I can work during the last years of my college, 5-year degree. My dad gave me a loan to buy the things I would need to be able to do it once he found out. over $1,000. And I could take out more if needed, for only this, and make payments whenever, no interest charged. My teacher gave me her old makeup kit. No makeup, just something for transporting it easily in. That only was dirty and didn't have locks on it, and my dad painted it white and painted cherry blossoms with my name in big neon pink letters on it for an Easter gift to me. I leave my kit in my room, in the corner, behind my dresses for my musical performances for college. Now, my stepmom is just getting interested in makeup. I give her tips and a list of what products would be good for her skin. I even told her I'd give her a discount if she wanted me to do her makeup, the price of products used only. Her response was,
Why can't you do it for free? We're family.
My entitled mom alarms were going off. I told her I need to pay back the loans I have, and left when she started getting mad. I already didn't like her, nor respect her at this time. If I leave for a night, I lock my bedroom door and bring the only key to my bedroom in the house with me. I went to a family barbecue for Memorial Day weekend. 2 aunts, 2 uncles, my grandfather, my teacher, her best friend, my mom, myself, and my 2 cousins, one who's 6 and one who's 4, and stayed 2 nights. When I came back, my bedroom door was unlocked, which was a red flag since it's a force of habit to lock it. I looked and saw my kit in the middle of the room, open. That was a red flag factory. I just broke down and cried. My dad saw me and saw what was in my room. He knew that it was all wrong. My stepmom comes down, wearing the makeup from the kid, and wondered what was wrong. My dad asked her what she had done, and my stepmom told him,
Well, I made a copy of her key and borrowed your stuff. Makeup is cheap. You can replace it.
I almost punched her. My dad took her into the garage and tore her a new one. She cried, said he was overreacting, and drove off to her son's/daughter's/brother's house. I calculated how much it would cost for me to sanitize, clean, and replace the things that couldn't be sanitized. Eyeliners, mascaras, broken brushes, broken powder products, whole pallets that had been completely destroyed, etc., and shipping for all of it. It came out to over $750. One of my pallets was $44 alone, no shipping, and was a personal favorite brand of mine. Shout out to Glamlight. My dad sold one of her sewing machines, returned the build-it-yourself dollhouse that he had bought her, and sold things of hers until he got over $900, all in cash. He used some of that money to replace my locks. Only one key was made and transferred the rest of the money to my account, which I used to get what I needed to replace everything, using my code that all beauticians have to get a small discount with certain brands. I ended up having about $100 left over and used it to buy my dad's Father's Day gift and used the rest of the leftover money as loan payment. When my stepmom came back, she freaked out at my dad and I for destroying her hopes and dreams. All I said was, "You break it, you buy it." She screamed at both of us, said she deserved all of the things she paid for. I was petty enough to have left her all the broken and unusable makeup and brushes where her sewing machine used to be, with the cost of each product plus shipping taped to it. She refuses to look, talk, or even be in the same room as me now, and my dad said that she has one more chance before he kicks her out for good. So, happy ending. But the entitled mom/my stepmom is still as entitled as before. I always lock my room now and keep my personal makeup in my room. Quick add-on. My dad always told me something. Don't upset or mess with people who handle your food or money. And money and time are 2 things you should never waste. So when my stepmom had done that and messed with technically my money, he was furious that she was wasting my money. So he made sure in the end she only wasted her money and not mine. Update. My dad loves all the comments you guys have made about him. He thought he was being a jerk to her, and this has made him know that he was in the right. Update. Holy! My stepmom, out of childishness, poured and splashed water all over the fridge. It froze overnight, and now it's having to force things out of the freezer to get it out. My dad sent out a group message that something had split and everything was stuck, and my stepmom replied,
You're getting a taste of your own medicine. You ruined my life, so I'll ruin yours. Lol.
My dad might kick her out now. Update again. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, my stepmom wasn't home yet. I asked my dad, who's up making guitar amplifiers out of old speakers, his side job, DM me if you want a custom-made guitar amp, and asked where she is. He said, not looking up from his work, she won't be here for a little while. I'm going to let her rethink her choices, then decide while she's gone if it's better or worse for me while she's away. I feel like he's nicely saying that he kicked her out, but it also might just be a break. Also, he saved the freezer. A big thank you. I'm crying. You guys are so amazing. The ones who offer support are such a happy welcome in my life of being alone, and the ones who donate their spare makeup that they don't need anymore, thank you so much. I love all of you for helping me in this crisis. I posted this thinking I'd get verbal support to help my dad realize he needs to leave her in the comments, but instead for a support system of kind and caring strangers. Thank you so much, all of you. Karen follows me into the men's restroom. A few weeks ago, I was visiting my local big box bookstore, looking for some good clearance items before the store closed permanently. The dead mall it was attached to is being demolished. The store has no dress code, but the employees do wear lanyards, and I wasn't. So I was browsing around my preferred sci-fi section when I realized I needed to use the nearby restroom. So I headed in that direction, which happened to also be next to the mid-store customer service counter. Karen noticed me, positions herself directly in front of me, and blocking my path to my urinary destination.
I don't know why you don't keep that desk staffed, but I really need your help finding my book. Are you going to help me or not?
Not, I say, remembering the urgency of my business, and I step around her with a variation of, I don't work here, continuing to my destination, thinking that will be the end of the encounter. It's not to be. I hear her voice rising in pitch and volume on its way to full Karen Banshee as she literally follows me into the men's room, and I'm convinced she was about to grab my arm and pull me around to face her. Being conscious of social norms about public exposure, I made it into a stall and locked the door for privacy. That didn't stop her from knocking on the door and threatening to get me fired before she heard the really solid stream hit the water and, I'm convinced, realized for the first time what it was that she had done. I heard her embarrassed sounding squeak/huff, and she hightailed it out of there. I finished my thing and washed my hands and came out to witness her being escorted out of the store by a properly lanyarded employee. I only caught the tail end of the conversation where Karen stated she was
never coming here again.
And the employee had a classic response. Neither am I. We're closing. Karen thinks she can have free use of my truck. A few years ago, I had a side hustle on my days off. My job had a rotational schedule, so I worked 2 weeks on, then got 2 weeks off. I made plenty of money at my job, but it didn't hurt to make a little extra cash. I was in essence a tour guide, but for the region I lived in. I didn't have any planned tours, but usually just took people out to see neat places that they would not know about or think to go to. I was adamant about getting paid upfront, and customers signed an agreement that made guarantees to protect my truck from messes or damage. Never had any issues, fortunately, and people always enjoyed the places I showed them. Except for one family. They seemed friendly enough when I was having them sign a contract and collecting my fee. I should mention my fee was $15 an hour plus $75, $35 if it was a half day. This covered a tank of fuel plus paid for my time shuttling you around. I also kept a cooler with free water and some limited snacks. You were paying for my knowledge of the region, plus knowledge about the area's history and such. Plenty of times I had customers tell me, I've never seen so much cool stuff in one day. You could maybe find something cheaper, but I didn't care. Once money changed hands with this family, the attitude changed. They began treating me like I was a second-class citizen, but I had their money, so I didn't care. I drove them around to some of the most beautiful scenery you can find. It's rare people are left speechless by these places, and never have I seen someone not be impressed. Until now. Every place I showed them, they just seemed disappointed. One of the places was a ski town popular with a lot of celebrities, not Aspen, and they were just like, it's okay. I can't deny I was a little offended by their indifference, but whatever. They were never outright rude during the day, but were surprised when I didn't buy lunch for them. As I said, you're paying for my time. Food is on you. But then I got back to town and dropped them off at their hotel, and it got interesting. The wife says,
You can just park in the back and leave the keys at the desk. Tell them they are for the Smith family.
Me. I'm sorry? What? Wife.
This truck. Just park it in the back. We might use it later.
Me. This is my truck. I'm not leaving it here. That's not part of the deal. Wife.
Oh, please. There's no way you can own a vehicle like this. It obviously belongs to your company.
Me. I do this job self-employed, on my days off from my regular job. I assure you, this is my truck. I can show you my name on the title.
Young man,
I had just turned 30.
if you don't do as you're told, I will be forced to call your boss.
Me? You mean me? I am my boss.
Okay, smarty, get your boss on the phone right now.
I thought about just driving off. It's 8 p.m., but then had a better idea. I called my supervisor at my real job. We'll call him Dan. Dan has been in the oil field for 14 years and could be quite blunt. Good supervisor. He knew what I did on my days off and even sent people my way a few times. He answered and I just said, "One of my clients is demanding to speak with my boss." So here she is, and handed her the phone. Wife, sounding smug.
I tried to tell your driver to leave the truck here so we could use it, but he lied and said he owns it.
I could hear him yelling, "Are you stupid?" I didn't discern anything else, but I know he gave her a good thrashing. She just walked to the window, handed me my phone and said,
He wants to talk to you.
then walked away. Boss, that fix your problem? Me. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Boss, anytime, brother. Have you ever been on any tours? And if so, where at? Please let us know. Bridezilla Karen ends up looking like a pauper at her own wedding. I, female 48, have known Pat, female 48, for decades. As far as I can remember, she was fixated on having 5 kids and a picket fence dream life. I slowly cut ties with her in college because she was an opportunist and I didn't trust her. She is both manipulative and forceful. Her idea of cute rubs me the wrong way. Pat likes to walk like a penguin when she wants to elicit pity, and she usually does this when she wants to evoke the underdog narrative. I've never seen someone act so despicable and ridiculous at the same time. I moved on with my life, happily got rid of her for years. Pat eventually found me on Facebook. I accepted her friend request out of politeness. Pat has become the epitome of a permissive mother. Her 5 kids do as they please, and she never calls them out. She tried to force a relationship between me and her daughters and made them call me auntie. Pat tried to drop them off at my house uninvited. Her phone calls were insistent. She tried to monopolize my time and she began to show up at my job. I created some boundaries, so she tried to find loopholes. It was a nightmare. My husband and I hosted a party for the community center, not the real name, new members. The community center is actually a very informal initiative, and my husband and I mainly serve the homeless population. We prefer to help strangers instead of catering to potentially narcissistic acquaintances. We don't mind lending a hand, but we have encountered truly dishonest choosing beggars. There are other services, like one of the members who helps women get their weddings and prom dresses for free. The community center location headquarters is actually a farm owned by an elderly couple. There's a barn, a venue, and a very nice green field with an artificial lake and some fowl. They charge for the use of their facilities, for weddings, etc., but not for community-oriented stuff. Pat had always been salty at her husband for demanding that she go back to work after baby number 3. In the meantime, he worked 3 jobs. She demanded he get her pregnant to fulfill her dream of having 5 kids. He didn't agree because she was already nearly 45 and felt like he might never be able to retire. She got away with bringing new babies into this world anyway. Her fascination with being pregnant comes from all the attention she gets. She had at least 1 miscarriage in between each kid. Pat latched onto our group. She never missed any of our activities. I hated having her in my house, but it was an open invitation that included virtually everyone, and she was very active as an event organizer. I didn't like the way her kids behaved. We have a designated area for parties and entertainment, but her kids ended up inside my room. We ended up having to keep watch on them and enjoyed 0 of our own party. I called her days later to get my point across regarding their overall behavior, but she completely cut me off and began talking about herself and said her kids wanted to come visit again and use our pool. I never answered that. I didn't want to say, "No, I will not have your brats over." She also called me as summer was approaching specifically to let me know her middle daughter was bored and wanted to spend a week at our home. I politely declined, citing that me and my husband have to work and cannot entertain guests. Pat paid no heed. Her kid called me on the weekend, calling me auntie, and attempted to coax me by saying, "Mom says you invited me to spend summer with you." I quickly clarified and offered an explanation to avoid hurting the kid's self-esteem. Never mind. Her daughter just hung up on me. Pat's Facebook also showed some red flags. Some cryptic rants here and there were visible, along with friends' comments and complaints on how she asked a particular person to watch her kids only for a couple of hours and ended up leaving them all day. Another of her friends criticized her girls' night out because Pat had just asked them to be patient and wait until she could pay back some money that she owed them, yet she had money to spend on Friday night outings. I thought those very public comments on private matters were more like a cry of lost patience. Unpleasant things began to happen, like the time she volunteered to wrap the Xmas presents for the underprivileged kids. We all wanted to create a mix of less costly gifts with really nice ones. Surprisingly, some nice and eye-catching toys and games went missing, but turned up under her Christmas tree, courtesy of her mother-in-law's Facebook posts. No one could prove anything, but it was hate-inducing. Or the time my daughter called me in tears to pick me up after she attended Pat's daughter's birthday, Casey. My daughter had been ignored all night because she didn't gift her the expensive gaming stuff Casey practically demanded. My daughter did ask, but I said no. We would buy her a very nice and thoughtful present according to her taste. So when I went to pick up my daughter, she was sitting alone in the living room while Casey and her friends stayed outside. Stories about Pat and her family multiplied. The owners at the farm community center decided to keep their gates locked unless they had guests or events because Pat got in the habit of driving in whenever she pleased, and it was either her kids screaming and disturbing ongoing weddings, throwing rocks at the koi in the lake, or harassing the geese in the yard. Or how she stiffed another soccer mom with a lunch bill and then pulled the struggling financially card. Or how other parents hated her because she created unnecessary hostile competition. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandma's ring. It's not an expensive piece of jewelry, but it's vintage and girls nowadays want to look boho. My granny gave it to me when I became a teenager, so I passed it on to my kid so she could wear it on her birth week. It was weird that she became quiet and distracted after that. She also didn't want to go to school, and my husband and I became suspicious. She never opened up, and my other kids had no clue. We went to her school, but her teachers assured us nothing had changed in her environment. My husband and I suspected that she was being bullied, but our kid gave us no tools to support her. My kid is very sunny and very compassionate. She has never had any problems with other kids. I called her best friend's mom. Natalie, my kid's BFF, told us what was going on. Casey, Pat's eldest, and my daughter had become close. I knew this and wasn't too thrilled. I found the age gap, Casey was 17, not exactly inappropriate, but I'd rather see my daughter spend time with friends in the same age range. Casey is very beautiful and a gifted student. She is also very conceited. To make the story short, she asked my daughter if she could try on the ring, and she refused to give it back. She later claimed she had lost it, but would look for it, so my daughter was distraught. My daughter kept asking for her ring, and as a result, Casey shunned her and spread the word that my kid was trying to steal her ring. Some kids at school took Casey's side, so now Casey just wore my kid's jewelry to school like nothing had happened. If that doesn't qualify as taunting, I don't know what does. My guilt comes from not being able to get my daughter to open up and feel safe telling me the truth. I talked to her and she burst into tears. I was both pained as a mother and furious that some teenage jerk was doing this under our noses. I went straight to Pat's car after school. I asked to talk as Casey was about to get in, so I grabbed Casey's hand and asked to see her jewelry. Casey froze and she tried to make a fist, so I became relentless. Casey yelled, "Mom!" and Pat struggled to get out of the car. I slid the ring off. Casey has tiny hands and wore the ring on her index finger. First, Pat yelled at me. After I confronted her with the engraving on the band, my grandma's maiden name, she argued it was loaned to her daughter by my kid. Then she said she bought it. I paid no heed. I did warn them that I knew what Casey had been doing to my daughter. Pat called me to tell me off. She said she was trying to raise an assertive young woman, and I had just messed that up by being overbearing. She never apologized for her thief of a kid. Pat's husband, Hank, is what can be described as a doormat. Pat wore him down to a knob. He had no choice but to obey her to keep the peace. She was a bully who actively withdrew affection when he didn't follow her wishes, even in public. So she got kids number 4 and 5 after a relentless campaign that included leaving him for 2 months. Her pregnancies were a nuisance because she expected to be treated like the only lady who has ever been pregnant. She strolled around in a wheelchair almost immediately after getting pregnant, and she would get very sick on weekends, so her kids were often sent to friends and family so that she could rest. Pat systematically bullied Hank. She would leave town and take the kids with her. Poor Hank would look distraught, drinking on his porch or just looking really lonely. This is how she got off the hook and was able to leave her job. Hank had virtually no voice, so he struggled to keep the marriage together. Everyone liked him, but hated her equally. Hank loved to talk to other people, but seemed concerned that Pat would be upset. Over time, according to my husband, Hank began to show signs of depression and mental distress. Our friend, Lena, runs the wedding/prom dress initiative. It's not complicated. Dresses are sourced from donations, eBay, trunk shows, etc. Unusually beautiful dresses are retained so that more than one bride gets to wear them. In some cases, a bride will pay $50, but most of the time, the dresses are donated to the bride. Pat was involved in this. Lena kept her in because they never had any issues and her task was limited to just shipping the dresses out. Pat decided to renew her vows, and her bridezilla, Karenzilla attitude became the icing on the cake. For starters, she bullied another couple into giving up their wedding date at the farm because she
Needed to renew her exact wedding date.
They were not impressed with her harassment, so they booked another venue. As a result, the farm owners were upset because Pat was already costing them money after she had successfully negotiated a cut in their rate because she couldn't afford it, but will repay by doing maintenance work around the venue. She never made good on her word. Pat became attached to a particular dress that was already assigned to another bride. Lena made it clear that she would need to pay for her own dress, so Pat played it cool and shipped the wrong gown instead. She was adamant that it was the right dress, despite all the notes on Leah's agenda. The other bride was truly gracious about it. She was obviously disappointed, but never made a scene. What bothered me the most is that I picked that dress and bought it for $40 at a garage sale. Not my money, Leah's money. It was a vintage dress, ankle length, white with lots of lace and a huge bargain. Again, when confronted, Pat did a Casey and used the "this is mine" strategy. We felt so bad for the other bride that we did our best to get her something nice to wear. The other bride was a true fighter. She had pulled out of welfare, earned her high school diploma, and was working to get on her feet by trying to earn her certificate as an acrylic nail technician. So her reward was to have some Karen steal her dress? Pat never admitted to messing up, but just by the fact that she claimed it was her dress, we knew. Lena never allowed her in the warehouse again. Their last phone fight ended with Pat bringing up the other bride's past, like it mattered, and
This conversation is over. It's my dress and you are mistaken.
that was weeks before the other bride's wedding. Pat went all out on her wedding decor. She spent way too much. She hired a caterer for some of the food, mainly mimosas and appetizers, but the wedding invitation included a request for specific dishes for her Sunday brunch wedding. Either she ran out of banquet money or was on a completely moocher model. I picture the penguin walking upon practically asking everyone to supply her wedding reception grub, and I cringe. There is nothing wrong with potluck weddings. In fact, they can be a nice addition to a very cozy and family-oriented wedding reception. But don't you need to at least be close to your guests in order to ask for such a thing? Even I got an invitation. I told everyone I wasn't going because I was very uncomfortable being told what to bring and was probably expected to give them a cash gift on top of that. Some of the older ladies in our group agreed. Some said they would not decline in advance because she's a bully and they didn't want a confrontation. Lena called me the night before Pat's re-wedding. Lena was there to close the Saturday night bingo, and Pat was awfully friendly. But that's what she does whenever things are going her way. Lena peeked into the garment bag and saw the exact same dress while Pat was caught up supervising the wedding decoration. The thing with Karens is that they expect everyone to suck it up or make their dreams come true, or they simply underestimate everyone and think we are all fools. Lena is a very straightforward person with a "so sue me" attitude. She told me that she would just ruin the dress. After all, it was hers, so she could do whatever she wanted. If Pat wanted to take legal action, and should things get ugly, she needed to prove ownership. However, the dress was the same. The marks inside the hem and the tags were the same. Even the tag numbers that were punched to identify each dress for logistics purposes matched. Pat had the dress altered, with some extra beading and dyed to a deep cream color, but it was obviously the same garment. Lena and I snuck in before the venue was closed for the night. All brides are allowed to stay in a small bedroom for a small charge so that they don't need to drive in their own wedding day. Honestly, the makeshift chapel was gorgeous. I don't know how she paid for it, but it was full of flowers and presumptuous details. I naively brought in some ink to spill on the dress, but Lena said she wanted something more awful, like a nasty surprise. Ink would be too obvious if she saw it ahead, so she may be able to snag another gown from somewhere. No, the ideal thing was to have her trust the dress was fine. So Lena locked herself in a bathroom stall and completely cut out the back panel. She patiently put it back on its hanger and zipped the bag. We left through the emergency door with the back of the dress stuffed inside Lena's purse. I completely hate people who target and steal from anyone they, Pat and her kid, calculate to be in a weaker position. The wedding was scheduled at 9 a.m. Pat called me at 7 a.m., but I ignored her calls. I picked up by 8 a.m., both curious and wondering if she suspected anything. Pat was frantic. She was crying that her dress was missing by half. I purposely made her explain, being annoyingly dense and continually interrupting like she does and stalling the conversation. She asked me if I could lend her my wedding dress. I said no, sorry. Then she asked me if I would help her get a dress. I was satisfied to remind her that the town's bridal shops were closed on Sunday and the others that would open were almost an hour away. The farm is already almost 1 hour away from our town. If Pat could get a shop to rent a dress, she would need to try the dress on and get it steamed. Even if the dress was ready to wear, it would easily take more than 2 hours, round trip. She tried to ask me to go pick a dress. Who would pay for this? Even if a shop were open and I brought her a dress, it would add to the cost. Also, these shops open at 10 or 9:30 at the earliest. By the time they got it to her, it would be time to wrap up the wedding because she needed to clear the venue by 12 for the next event. She broke down and mumbled some stupid stuff I didn't understand. So Pat hung up on me and called Lena instead. She asked Lena to bring her anything she had available. Lena and I ended up delivering the most outdated, moss-smelling, oversized dress. Pat's disappointment was a mix between angry and emotional. She also tried to wear her knee-length silk bridal slip as a wedding dress, but it was too obvious and it looked really cheap. She tried to get her daughter to give her her own dress to wear with an open back zipper due to fitting issues, but Casey refused because she was going to wear it to the wedding. The dress needed a petticoat to plump up the skirt, which wasn't available, so it dragged all over the floor and Pat had to keep pulling it up. Pat walked down the aisle with one hand on her bouquet and another one grabbing her dress. The dress looked limp and weird with the arrangements of pins, they didn't show, that caused the sleeves and neckline to pucker into messy rims. She spent the ceremony looking uncomfortable and out of place. Very few people attended, but that was not part of any revenge. That was just how people reacted to her entitled attitude. The dress looked awful. The reception portion of the wedding had all this princely decoration, a very nice cake, and a bridezilla with a dress from heck. I didn't stay, but I was told she was so disappointed she spent her wedding sulking. There was no dance, no actual speech. She had to change into a shirt and leggings because the dress was too uncomfortable. Everyone talked about how Pat put on her flip-flops and walked around aimlessly until she ordered the ushers to start folding up the chairs within 1 hour of the reception. So she practically kicked everyone out and the cake was never cut. Pat wasn't the same after this. She was not as loud and avoided everyone. I think she was disappointed that nobody ran to her rescue, not even her family who came from out of town. Her husband finally cracked under all of the pressure and sought some help. He was slaving away and coming home to clean the house while Pat used her kids as an excuse to spend like crazy. Hank also had to do kids' homework because Pat never had time or never had patience. She also refused to get a part-time job so her kids could attend an after-school and get help with their school stuff. Therapy seemed to help Hank because the last time Pat left with the kids, he didn't seem distraught. He would be riding his bicycle and could be seen more relaxed while mowing his lawn. When Pat returned, he maintained the routine but was interested in going out by himself and doing things for himself. We began to see Pat alone all the time. Hank was seen less and less in the same car and eventually moved in with his parents. He filed for divorce on the grounds of emotional cruelty, and I don't think he won. Instead, I'm not sure of this because this is what I was told, there was some sort of settlement or agreement that she would not get close or interact with him unless it has to do with the kids. I also don't know if Pat even actually suspected who/what happened to her dress. She slowly pulled away from the community center and became less active in social gatherings. Pat also removed me from her Facebook as well as mostly everyone else from school and the center. Edit. Regarding my kid, there were no prior incidents. Pat, her family, and my family were not friends. I did see her often. After Casey's birthday incident, there were no additional situations until what happened with the ring. After that, Casey played the "Oh, Pete treated me badly" card because I physically removed the ring from her hands, but I honestly don't feel I need to protect her emotions. Have you ever known anyone like Pat? And if so, what did they do? Please let us know.
Oh, come on, she doesn't sound that bad. I'm just sorry for what happened to her wedding dress.
Do you really want to discuss your grade in front of the class? I was working as a long-term sub back in '07. A student who was never on time and never did any work was having a meeting with her guidance counselor. This school had them in the classroom. Because of these meetings, the kids were working on bookwork while I was doing grades for said meetings. The student told me to tell the guidance counselor that she was passing and could move on to US History 2 next spring. I told her I didn't want to discuss grades in front of the class, but we could go into the hallway and discuss it there. I had told every student before here the same thing, though in most cases I just wrote their year-to-date grade on a sticky note, which was usually enough. Most students had low B's to high A's. The students were offered a time slot to discuss their grade after school if they wished. Until this student, this was working just fine. She had skipped the part where she was supposed to get her grade slip, was late so didn't get the instructions, and didn't listen when told afterwards. Her classmates reminded her that she needed her sticky note, but she waved them off. The guidance counselor reminded her. She just sat down, and the counselor gave a much put-upon sigh and started working. A few minutes later, I get a, "Mister, I need you to tell her I'm passing this class." "Well, I have your grade right here. Just pick it up," I replied.
No, just tell me. I want everyone to know how great my grades are.
Apparently, she had been bragging, for some reason, that she was acing my class. Also, apparently, her classmates thought it was a hilarious joke, considering several were suppressing laughter by that point. "I don't want to discuss your grades in front of everyone." But she kept insisting, rather than coming up and getting the slip, a mere 10 feet away from where she was working. One of the students shouted out, "Mister, she doesn't care, just tell her." At this point, most of the class and the guidance counselor started to get the biggest grins, the malicious compliance. The counselor added, "If she wants you to inform everyone, then I suggest you inform everyone." Reluctantly, it took another minute or so of me trying to say no, I shared her grade. Me. "Your grade is a 2. Not 2.0, but 2%. There is no way you're going to pass this class unless you and I come to an agreement about your schoolwork."
Wait, how did I get a 2?
Came the confused reply. "Because you signed your name on all of the tests and quizzes, and because you came to class on time some of the time."
But what does that mean, mister?
With continued confusion, or a really good attempt to play innocent. At this point, one of the other students chimed in, "You got the pity grade." And at that point, the guidance counselor hung up her phone, having, unnoticed, set up a parent/teacher conference in her office for later that week. At that point, the student was sent back to her desk for the next student to come. Aftermath. It ended up being a long meeting. 4 core subject teachers, the counselor, the student, mom, and grandma. She had her meeting and was told by each teacher what she had to do to have a chance of passing their classes, with only half the time left. My plan for her was 100% attendance with no tardies, late arrivals, without a note, making up all the missing assignments, and then to complete, not get 100s or even passing, just complete everything and she would pass. Anything over that would improve her grade proportionally. She agreed, and then after 2 days stopped trying and eventually had to repeat the grade. Entitled parent tries to rob a coffee shop because of dropped donut. This happened in 2012, so all details may be a little bit foggy. I used to work at a famous coffee shop here in Canada. It was my first job that I had worked at since I was 17, so at the time I had already been there for 2, going on 3 years. About 1 to 2 hours into the shift, this guy comes in, orders a coffee for himself and a donut and juice for his kid. My partner working front cash with me picked up the donut and as he was putting it in the bag, dropped it on the floor. I did what every normal human being would do working fast food. I threw it away while my partner grabbed another. Apparently, this didn't bode well with this entitled parent. He lost it, calling my partner an idiot for dropping it, and began demanding that we fish the donut out of the garbage as it was a waste of food. Normally, I'd agree, but after a long shift and no one cleaning the floors by the cash due to how busy it was, I wasn't about to give him a floor gunk donut. I told him that it is possible. It's in the garbage, and regardless of it being in there, I wasn't allowed to serve floor donuts to customers. That was fine. He paid for his food and left. Now, I was working front cash on evening shift. The previous shift was run ragged and couldn't do very much. As I said before, it was about 2 hours into our shift and cashes were just changed out, so I knew exactly what was in the cash. Now, not many people pay for $6 worth of food with a $20 bill. Most people that come in only use tens, or if it's a super large order, their card. Why am I saying this? Well, this guy came back about 20 minutes after he had initially left. This time, not for coffee. This time, he claimed I had given him the wrong change. He said he had given me a 20 and that I'd only given him change for a 10. Oh, really? Well, let me check quickly, sir. If I did, that's my mistake. So I opened the cash. Remember when I said cashes were only recently changed? Well, the way our manager does cashes, she put a specific amount of money in there based on what we go through most. 20s? Well, seeming how we basically never go through them, saved the odd time there was only one in the cash. I told him that it's impossible for him to have given me a 20 as there was only one in the cash, which was the one the manager put in the cash when she changed them over. He didn't like this at all and left again. Normally, this would be the end, right? Nope. He came back a third time, this time without his kid. It wasn't busy at this point, so we were doing chores while serving the odd customer. He walks up to the cash. I look at my colleagues and walk up to him. What can I help you with, sir?
Open your cash register and give me some money.
It was hard to keep my composure at this guy. He was weaponless, his kid in the car waiting, so I chuckled and said to him, "Sure, let me just run that by my manager real quick." You'd think he'd leave, but no, he stayed. At this point, everyone recognizes the guy. My manager is upset because she knows that he got back the right amount of money. He was told to get out, don't come back. If you do, the cops will be called and we'll place charges for uttering threats. This isn't the only time I deal with entitled parents and Karens though. Oh no. I have plenty more stories about said coffee shop. Speaking of donuts, what are your favorite kind of donuts of all time? Please let us know.
Cream-filled or jelly-filled. I love donuts.
Not my job to clean your patient. This was a few years ago, but it's still very satisfying to think about. Backstory. I was a 24-year-old guy working as a mental health technician at a county hospital in Arizona. I was specifically trained and certified to work with teens, youth, adults, and elderly who were a danger to themselves or others. This included those who were brought in by the police and needed one-on-one supervision 24 hours a day. It's generally very boring and easy because the patient is sedated and strapped down. This story is about one of these guys. A patient had been brought into the ER by the cops for whatever reason and had been extremely difficult to deal with. I had been requested to go to their wing of the hospital. We normally only work in the mental health ward and monitor and restrain if needed for the hospital staff. I was chilling in the corner of his room on my phone, probably playing games, when a nurse came in to check on him. The conversation went something like this. Nurse, I'm going to need you to do something more than sitting there in the corner on your phone. Me, excuse me? Nurse, I need you to clean him and empty his urine bag. Me, nope, I'm not trained to do that. Nurse, listen, I don't have time to deal with this. You're going to do this or I'm going to get the doctor. Me, do you see CNA, Certified Nurse's Aide, on my badge anywhere? It says MHT, Mental Health Tech. I am not certified to do a CNA's job. If I did clean him and change his urine bag, but something went wrong, it would be your job and not mine. Go ahead, you can get the doctor and ask him yourself. Nurse, you have no right to tell me what your job is. I will have your job for this. She storms out of the room and looks for the doctor. After a few minutes, I can hear her voice just outside the room. I go just to the doorway. I'm still able to see my patient, to hear her and see the doctor. Nurse to the doctor. He, pointing at me, is telling me that he won't do what I asked him just because he isn't a CNA. Me to the doctor. She's telling me I have to clean him and change his urine bag, but I've told her that it would be her job if I did something wrong. Doctor to nurse. He's right. He has no responsibility, nor is he certified to do it. He's supposed to sit with him and watch him to keep you safe. Do your job and stop trying to find someone else to do your job. It turns out there was no CNA for her area that night. She was trying to push her work off on other people, and I was her last attempt until the doctor lost his patience. Chips aren't that big of a deal. So this happened over a year ago, but I just remembered it after a friend asked me about work stories. We haven't talked in a while. When I remembered this, I started laughing. Okay, so it's, if I remember right, Saturday morning. At the time, I didn't usually work weekend mornings, but we were short-staffed. I'll use M1 for manager, M2 for me, and C1 for the customer, C2 for their spouse. I was new to being a manager on duty, so I'm somewhat nervous, and on top of that, I usually work the night shift. Some of the customers we had were ones I'd never seen before. Here comes customer 1, change in hand, and 1 bag of chips. They hand me the chips, I scan them, and they freak out. Customer 1,
Excuse me? Your ad says those should have been $2.50. I'm not paying $3 for 1 bag. You need to adjust the price. That's false advertising. That price is outrageous.
Me, I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you show me where it says this? If it's true, I'll honor it. We go to the aisle where she claimed the ad was. The ad actually said 2 for $5. She points at the ad, grabs it off the shelf, and holds it about 5 inches from my face. I have a bit of a temper, but trying to be professional, I take the ad and explain. Me, ma'am, this says 2 bags for $5. In order for the bag to cost $2.50, you need to buy 2. If you only buy 1, it's the regular price.
That's false advertising. How was I supposed to know that? There's nothing on here that says that. I want your manager. I know she'll fix it. She always fixes stuff like this.
Me, yes ma'am. I'll have her up here in a minute or 2. I say, calling her up to the front to tell us woman that the ad isn't wrong. A minute or 2 goes by, but my manager isn't on her way yet. I call her again, and she says she's busy with a truck. I tell the customer my manager can't get away from the truck as nice as possible, realizing my situation. Her face immediately turns from patiently happy to unyielding rage. At this point, I just want to change the price so she'll leave, but we can't change prices for an ad that isn't wrong. She's staring me down, demands a price change or my manager, and is now holding up my line of 3 people. Here's the explosion. Me, excuse me ma'am, there are customers waiting behind you. Would you mind stepping to the side so I can help them? I'm sure manager 1 won't be much longer. Customer,
This is ridiculous. You're not even finished helping me. Hold on.
she pulls out her cell phone and calls customer 2, her husband.
Baby, these people aren't doing their job. I need to use the bathroom, and I need you to hold my place in line. Can you please step in here for a bit?
I guess he agreed because he walked in shortly after. She leaves, I assume to get manager 1 with a bathroom break as an excuse. Customer 2 stands there for a few minutes and asks me, "So, what part of your job are you not doing?" She's been a bit of a jerk lately, and I'd like to know. I explain how she wants a price change on something that wasn't advertised correctly. It's store policy to avoid doing so, and she won't take no for an answer / demanding my manager fix it for her. Customer 2, "Well, how much is she short? 45 cents, 60 cents. If it's not that much of a difference, I'll pay it. You seem like a nice boy. Must be new too, since I've never seen you here before." Me, I've been here for almost 5 months now, and I usually work the night shift. I tell him as I'm ringing up the people behind him. We've been short since someone quit, so I'm filling in during the day for now. Long story. He laughs, and then my store phone rings. Apparently, his wife is now demanding a price cut from my manager in the back. Manager called me to put her husband on the phone. I hand him the phone, turn to check a text message since my line was empty, and I heard some words that still make me laugh randomly when I think about them. Customer 2, "Woman, if you don't get your butt up here and pay this boy for these chips, I'ma beat yo A until it's a color shrimp can't see. If I gotta go back there, the boy's getting a lick too. You're grown, so act like it." I'm laughing so hard, I drop my phone. Luckily, she came up front. My manager came with her since the truck was checked in now. The husband hands me her chips again so I can scan them and tell her the price. She's so red at this point. I'm just waiting for her to start calling me names. She looks truly defeated that we couldn't knock off $1.11, I think, for some stupid chips. She walks to their car, but the husband stays. He gave me a $20 tip. Speaking of chips, what are your favorite chips of all time? Please let us know.
I could really go for some hot Cheetos right now.
Am I the jerk for being upset when my husband took my book and refused to give it back until I made him dinner? I, 24, female, study pediatrics, and it's been the hardest year of medical school. It's physically and mentally exhausting. I began working at an outpatient clinic from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm currently studying for NBME. With little time, I try to study during lunch break, and in the evening when I get home and after I make my husband a meal. I'm 14 weeks pregnant, and it's incredibly exhausting studying hard for the upcoming exam, and I can barely find the time between the clinic, studying, and self-care. I use the past year papers and learn about the type of topics in those papers and read as much as I can, plus going through textbooks and summarizing and taking notes. My husband, male 27, has been getting a little demanding lately, and I noticed that especially after I started preparing my exam, I spend time studying in the bedroom. He'd come in and ask me to take some time to make him dinner. I'd make him dinner, then go back to studying. Then after he finishes, he'd knock on the door and ask me to do the dishes. I'd get frustrated because he won't do the dishes and knows I have no time for washing the dishes, and then he'd take a shower and leave the bathroom wet, causing me to take time to clean it up. Then he'd tell me to go study elsewhere because he wanted to sleep. I study in the kitchen sometimes, in the living room when he's sleeping. In the morning, before I go to work, I'd wait for him to wake up to make him coffee and then leave at 8:30, which is a bit late. He wanted to invite his family for dinner, but I told him I was busy studying. He got mad at me for that and said that I needed to do more around the house, but I do what I can trying to manage. Last night, he got home at 10 p.m. He came into the room wanting me to make him dinner. He got upset when I told him it was way past dinner time and wanted me to make him something to eat. I told him there was leftovers in the fridge that he can eat, but he wanted me to cook. My exam was approaching, and I needed every minute to be able to study as much as I can. We started arguing. He said he got fed up with my treatment and took my book. Said I'd get it back once I made him dinner. I was so angry with what he did. I demanded the book back and told him to stop acting so selfishly and trying to ruin my career. He lashed out, saying that he had been working all day as well and didn't have a decent meal. We argued back and forth. He gave it back and went to the other room. He made himself a sandwich and went to sleep. Before leaving for work, he said that I was treating him poorly and that I need to take care of him more and not ignore him like that. He demanded that I apologize for last night, but I didn't. Just to make things clear and tell his side of the situation, he says that I'm neglecting him lately and was upset that I can't do the things I used to do before I started studying. He just won't understand that my current circumstances are difficult and that he needs to be supportive during this time instead of behaving like this. Edit. He is in law enforcement. He works long hours and isn't always at home. The reason I do most of the chores is because I know how hard he works, but he should support me and do the same for me when I'm studying and trying to keep everything balanced. It makes me sad that this is how he reacted towards me needing time and support. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know.
I think he should be the one making her dinner, to be honest.
Fired? Are you sure? Okay. Note 1. This story was told to me by a friend and it's about her father. It takes place around 2005. Note 2. This happened in Sweden, where there's no at-will employment. Once an employee is past the initial 6-month probation period, you can't fire them without a cause, which also requires an established paper trail. So, my friend's father, who has since retired, was a mechanical engineer. He was around 55 when this happened and very experienced in his field. In fact, he had some skill sets that were so unique to the extent that you might be able to replicate them, but at extreme costs. We're talking multiple people from multiple companies, from multiple countries taking weeks, if not months, to get up to speed with specific projects to do the same things. He was a no BS kind of guy who did his job, did it well, but also pointed out problems and expected others to point out problems to him. He was extremely solution-oriented and had no time for office politics or keeping a positive attitude at work. Basically, your everyday grumpy old engineer who really knew his thing and was always ready to help if you asked, but not very forthcoming in team-building exercises and so on. He also ran his own business on the side, doing minor projects and so on. As was required by his employer, he had reported this and was sure to not cause any conflicts of interest, so his employer knew and accepted this. He was considered a valuable employee and got several awards that he cared little for. But anyway, during his many years with this employer, by all accounts, they paid him well, respected his knowledge, and accommodated his style, and he returned the favor by working very hard and making sure to mentor younger and newly employed engineers to make them effective coworkers. Then his firm was acquired by a larger firm and a new management team installed. Initially, everyone was promised that things would remain the same, but with the new management came a new office culture. The new management pressured for unpaid overtime, for a more American corporate culture with cheering and clapping and so on. He considered it extremely cringe and refused to participate. His status as a long-standing and knowledgeable employee kept him safe for some time before the new management realized that resistance to the new culture centered around him and started pressuring him to play along. When he did not, they turned increasingly hostile, realizing that he held a lot of soft power in the company, having mentored a large percentage of the engineers and resistance to their leadership centering around him. They started ordering him to work overtime. He answered that he was on time with his projects and that if they had identified an emergency requiring overtime, they would have to bring it up with the union to negotiate the overtime and make sure it was an actual emergency. The contract with the union said no overtime unless in an emergency. They tried to force him to participate in the cheering and clapping by making it mandatory for him to attend and yelling at him to participate. And he did, but so unenthusiastically that the event turned even more cringe and people started laughing. The workday turned more and more hostile, and he knew that things would come to a head sooner or later. Being an experienced engineer and knowing how to document things, he already had his ducks in a row. Then it finally happened. They caught him answering an email for his side business on his work laptop, brought him in, and fired him on the spot for theft of company resources. He sat at the conference table and looked the three managers in their eyes, one after the other, and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" They all said yes. "Are you really sure you want to do this?" He was escorted to his desk by security to leave his phone, his badge, and his computer at the desk, and then escorted out. Once out of the building, he phoned his union representative, who immediately canceled the firing, claiming there was no just cause, which meant that it would go to the labor board for arbitration. You see, the company had an IT policy that it was okay to use the company laptop for personal business, including a side business, as long as you were on a break and compliant with IT security protocols, and the company was aware of and had approved his side business, and he was on a break. Of course, he had his declaration of a side business signed by his former manager and the IT policy available and sent both to the union representative. Then he called his lawyer and asked him to send the pre-prepared cease and desist on 2 patents he had. Patents that were not that significant and nothing he could make any serious money out of, since they were mostly for very specific things used by the solutions he designed and used at his employers, but still his that he had brought with him into the employment and allowed the employer to use in exchange for a slightly higher pay. All duly documented in his contract, of course. Then he went home for some vacation and tending his side business. He was always a man to prepare and had enough money saved up to last him a good time, to the extent that he considered retiring entirely. My friend said he had 2 job offers from competitors that had looked to snipe him for some time within the week, basically as soon as they learned he was available. He was gracious but declined, but offered them to consult with his side business now that he had the time, which they eagerly accepted, at twice the hourly rate that he made at his earlier employers. His colleagues started ringing the day after for advice, since the projects he had managed could not go on without him. He was perfectly polite, but denied any information and help, saying he had left everything he had with management and to contact them, as he was no longer employed there. Several clients that phoned his private number were told the same thing. Since his private number was not on a public registry, he suspected that both colleagues and clients spent some time and/or money to find it. It took 2 weeks before a manager phoned him and asked things. He politely declined to answer, got yelled at, and replied with something like, "I'm sorry, you must have mistaken me for someone who works for you," and hung up. This happened a few times, and the next week HR phoned him and stated the firing had been a mistake and he was welcome back to his job. He again politely declined, saying that he awaited the labor board's decision, but until then he was happy to consult for them at 6 times his hourly pay, after taxes and administrative costs, of course. After a few days of wrangling and trying to negotiate, they had to accept, and then he sprung the patent issues on them, forcing them to pay for those too. Less than 2.5 weeks after being fired, he was back at his desk. After roughly 3 months, the firing came to the labor board. The employer stated that they believed they had handled the issue correctly, but were still willing to offer my friend's father his position back, in the interest of goodwill and a reconciliation. My friend's father and the union simply stated that he was now employed elsewhere, his own company, and no longer available. The labor board ruled in his and the union's favor, and he got the normal damages, 3 months pay damage and 24 months pay severance package, including pension and of course the lawyer costs of the union paid by the employer. According to my friend, her father continued to work there until he retired, working 20 hours or so per week and 10 to 15 hours for other companies, making a pretty penny, continuing to charge them 3 times what he charged their competitors as a jerk tax. The managers were not fired, but they were moved into their own group apart from the rest of the department when it came to bonus calculations, and the costs of her father's consultancy fees and the costs of the labor board arbitration were budgeted there, meaning they were constantly over budget and thus ineligible for bonuses for several years, which was a decent percentage of the incentives at that company, making at least one of them quit. My friend also said her father usually met any management complaints with a big crap-eating grin and, "What are you gonna do? Fire me?" after that. Entitled Mom wants me to take off my mask because it has a logo of the school her son couldn't get into. Context: I recently started as the front desk person at the campus housing office. Due to the school's policy to minimize the spread and keep us safe, they gave all the faculties and employees free masks that could be washed and reused again. If you want to know what school it is, it's the university in Washington that everyone applies to. The mask I had was in school color, with the school logo on the left side of the mask. I honestly didn't care if the mask had the school logo on it. The only reason why I wore it was that they are reusable and it reduces waste. No one had any problems with it. If anything, people jokingly said that they would trade their masks for mine. Cast: we've got me, we've got entitled mom, we've got her son. The story: until I met a Karen at the grocery store, I was there to pick up some stuff for dinner. I was in the meat section when a lady with a Karen haircut was staring at me. To her credit, she was wearing her mask, and her son, maybe around 17 or 18, was wearing one as well. And I was surprised to see Karen wearing a mask and thought maybe she wouldn't be so bad. Boy, was I wrong. So I'm looking for a certain pork cut, and the lady continues to stare at me. I continue to ignore it, and then she breaks the silence. Entitled mom:
Ugh, you are so selfish.
Me: pardon?
Wearing that mask, you are selfish and a jerk.
Me: I'm sorry, I'm still not following.
God, I thought you people are supposed to be smart. Can't you see your mask is upsetting my son?
I look over to her son, who looks like he wants to get out of there. Me: and what makes you say that? Entitled mom:
That mask is for that school. He applied there, but was rejected.
Her son: Mom, I told you it was all right.
Shut up.
She turns to me.
Now take that mask off.
Me: Ma'am, I'm really sorry that your son couldn't get in, but how exactly is me taking my mask off gonna help? Entitled mom:
How dare!
Me: I'm not finished. It's a mask, that's it. It was a requirement to get into the store. I only wore it because it was in my car.
Just go and grab another one.
And why should I do that? We don't even know each other. That's when entitled mom tried to charge at me to take the mask off my face. Her son held her back. Her son: You know what? I'm done. I told you I got into the other school, and I just started my first quarter. You were the only one who resented me going there because you're weirdly obsessed with this other school. If you want the school so much, then you go there. Entitled mom:
How can you say that? You should be defending me. I am your mother.
Her son: A mother who isn't happy that her son is a university student, and a mother with a false pride because she only has a high school diploma. I can make my own decision. Thanks. Entitled mom stormed off, and her son apologized on her behalf. We had a nice short chat. Turns out he was a pretty good guy, with high hopes in these trying times. Turns out he had saved up enough money from part-time jobs and his relatives who were actually happy about the acceptance and offered some financial assistance. He was in school housing, but entitled mom had tricked him the other day to come visit her. Am I the jerk for uninviting my family for my wedding because they want me to share it with my sister? To preface this, we only got engaged about 10 weeks ago and have plans for November of 2021. But if there's still issues at the time, we'll postpone. My sister, Rosie, and I have always had a complex relationship. But my bigger problem is her fiance, Mick, who I detest with my entire being. Mick is a complete jerk. One time my daughter, age 7, painted my son, age 5, and my fiance's nails, and Mick called my son and fiance sissies because they had nail polish on. He's also hit on me in the past and shamed me. So yeah, hate him. Fiance also hates him. My parents wanted to invite about 40 people to our wedding. Our guest list only has 20 guests, so the agreement we came to was they pay for 2/3 of the wedding as they had 2/3 of the guests. So far, all we have arranged is a venue, and it's a good thing we did too, because there's only 3 venues in the area, and November 2021 was the earliest date any of them had available. Rosie has looked for venues, and the first available date is April of 2022. Mom and Dad told us today that we will now be having a double wedding. Everyone involved is aware of the issues we have with Mick. We refused to share the wedding. My parents then said they were paying for 2/3 of it, so they should have final say. I responded that they don't get a say on who is getting married. They said I was being immature and should learn to share the spotlight, and I said that my issue was seeing Mick standing next to my fiance at the altar. My parents tried to young lady me, I'm nearly 28, saying that Rosie can't get anything in the next 18 months and it wasn't fair to make her wait that long. Plus, if they're paying for well over half of the wedding and won't be interfering on anything else, we should allow this. I then said that we would pay for the entire wedding ourselves and go back to our original guest list minus my parents, Mick, and Rosie, then hung up. I definitely just snapped in the moment, but the idea of sharing my wedding with Mick gives me a visceral negative reaction. Since hanging up, my fiance says that he's fine with this development, though he wasn't expecting it, but he supports me. However, my parents and sister feel I overreacted and called me a jerk for uninviting them over having one thing they wanted at the wedding they're paying for. I felt pretty confident in my choice, but then my brother, who hates Mick as much as I do, said I needed to calm the heck down and that my logical response here would have been to return my parents' money and remove their guests, not to uninvite my parents for my wedding entirely, and said unless I fix it, I'd be going full bridezilla. Am I the jerk? Edit. To be clear, I am 100% returning the money. The idea of the money was that we add my parents' guests, which is no longer happening, so I'll be returning their money. Well, what do you think? Is OP a jerk or not? Please let us know. At 17, I got a nurse suspended. So in high school, I worked as a certified nurse's assistant at a local nursing home. I only worked on the weekend because my parents wanted me to focus on school during the week. Anyone in the health field knows you cannot work with the elderly when you are sick because it wouldn't be safe for them at all. When I was 17, I got really sick. I got sick on a Tuesday with a light cough, and by Friday, I was going into 10-minute coughing fits. The next Monday was Labor Day. My regular doctor was closed all weekend. My parents decided we couldn't wait until Tuesday and went to the ER. I had a bad case of bacterial pneumonia. Regular pneumonia usually results from a bad case of the flu or another illness. But a perfectly healthy person can be in Walmart, for example, and walk by another person with BP who sneezes and breathes it in. It's extremely contagious. I was admitted to the hospital and hooked up to tubes. Turns out I was also dehydrated from being so sick. Around midnight, I realized I needed to call in since I won't be able to work for the next 3 days. So I called the nurse's desk and told the RN on duty that I've been diagnosed with pneumonia and won't be able to work this weekend and most likely the weekend after due to the possibility I could still be contagious. She told me,
If you wanted a 3-day weekend, you shouldn't have volunteered to work. You can't fake a cough to get out of work in the real world, sweetheart.
Then she hung up. I asked my dad what I should do. He took my phone and took a picture of me in the hospital bed. Then we got a signed note from the doctor and took a picture of that. He then told me to email those to the director of nursing for the facility. I did that and also told her what the RN had told me. Thing is, at this facility, any calls through the nurses station are recorded to protect the facility from lawsuits and or protect the residents from negligent caretakers. She was on record telling me what she did. When I returned 2 weeks later, I learned that she had been suspended for 8 weeks without pay for negligence. Edit. There are a lot of people asking how this was malicious compliance. During my CNA classes, we are told to protect the residents no matter what, even if it costs our positions. I went over many heads, directly to the director of nursing, which could have gotten me fired. The I don't work here that broke my heart. This all happened many years ago. We're talking mid to late 80s. Before I begin, I should just say that as a child, I was very close to my grandmother. Both my parents worked, and when I got out of primary school, I went to my grandparents' house until my mother picked me up. I also stayed with my grandparents during the school holidays. My grandmother taught me the basics of cooking, gave me a love of literature, and showed me the love to be had from music. In about 1983, my grandparents immigrated to New Zealand to live near their son. My mother, their daughter, sadly died in 1981, and I was well settled in secondary school by then, so they felt making a move like that would be good for them. It was tough saying goodbye to my grandparents. I was very close to both of them, but especially my grandmother. Some years later, 1988 or thereabouts, I had started university. Just before the end of my first year, my grandparents came back to the UK for a visit. They were staying with my dad, although he wasn't their son. He thought of them as his parents. Before Dad knew about their proposed visit, he had decided to have some work done to his house. He wanted double glazing installed and some work on the roof done. So when they arrived, there was a lot of activity going on around the house. About a week after my grandparents arrived back, my college broke up for the summer vacation and I traveled back home. I was excited to see Dad, but I was really excited to see my grandparents again. It had been a few years since I last saw them. We'd exchanged letters, but not seen each other since saying goodbye at the airport when they left for New Zealand. I got a taxi from the railway station to my dad's house, and the first thing I saw when I got home was the building site that was the front of his house, complete with builders. I didn't even need to open the front door. There wasn't one. It was being replaced. I left my backpack in the hall and went into the kitchen. My grandmother always liked being in the kitchen. The kitchen was her domain and was the place she felt most at home. The kitchen was also at the back of the house and was the farthest away from all of the work at the front of the house, so I went straight there. I opened the kitchen door and just stood there, smiling at my lovely, gentle, kind grandmother. She had aged so much, but was still, unmistakably, my grandmother. My smile slowly disintegrated when I saw the reaction on her face. It was a look of fear and anger. Then she grabbed my grandfather's hand and said, "He's coming in. Why is he coming in? Who does he think he is? Get out!" My grandmother, who I had seen every day of my life for the first 15 years of my life, who I loved so much, didn't even know who I was. She thought I was one of the builders and was terrified of me. The fear on her face broke me, ripped my heart in two. Edit. Thank you for the awards and all of your very kind comments. Some of your stories of your own loved ones' experiences with dementia and Alzheimer's have been heartbreaking. Thank you all for sharing. Am I the jerk for refusing to make a dish because my husband complained? My husband was raised by a single mom that worked 2 jobs, so most nights the boys were left to their own devices or one of their much older siblings would drop off fast food. Sunday was her one day off and she'd make a huge dinner, roast, potatoes, veggies, etc. She continued this even after they were grown, moved out, and she no longer had to work 2 jobs. She died 10 years ago and we all miss that roast. Recently, my husband has been talking about it a lot lately, so I decided a few Sundays ago to make the roast. I got the recipe card from his older sister so it would be exactly the same. Followed it to a T. He and the kids were so excited. I was too. I think it turned out fine. I followed it exactly and the kids and I loved it. However, my husband found everything to complain about. The potatoes weren't right, the chicken didn't taste the same, etc. He was really disappointed, and I said maybe part of the roast being so good was that it was the one meal a week his mom cooked, so it was special. I cook every night, and I'm not his mom. He looked me in the eye and said, "Or you just suck at making this," almost like he was mad at me. It was in his tone and voice. So I was done. I felt really unappreciated, and I just packed up the leftovers, which he brought to work every day, and complained it just wasn't the same and that I wasn't a good cook. But he ate them all. And we had other stuff that he could bring. No one was forcing him to eat it. This past Saturday, he asked why I stopped making the roast. I said, because apparently I don't make it right. He acted like I was crazy, so I made it yesterday. Same dang thing. He hated it, complained about how I can make anything but his roast. So I said I'm never making it again. I'm done. He got mad and said he wants the kids to have his tradition. I said I'm not hearing his whining every week. We'll have a Sunday dinner, but no more roast. I also packed up the leftovers for the kids today too, and the remaining for myself. He called me a bitter jerk. Am I being one? Well, what do you think? Is OP being the jerk or is her husband? Please let us know. Karen goes to a public pool and gets angry that other people are swimming. Hello, dear readers. I'm back with another entitled parent story for you, starring the biggest mega Karen I know, my mother. This happened when I was 11 in 2001. We had moved to a small town in a new state 2 years prior to this, and my mother was still getting her foothold in a new place. And by this, I mean my mother and her entitledness. Let me explain my mother. She's about 5 foot tall, broad-shouldered, tubby but strong from doing farm work for most of her life, and a resting bee face that would make Dolores Umbridge want to run the other way in fear and discomfort. Needless to say, she did not look good in a swimsuit. Much to my embarrassment, the first day she came with me to the public swimming pool. When we arrived at the pool, Mom went to the change room while I jumped straight in. I was already in my togs and board shorts when we left from home. A few minutes later, along came Mother Dearest in her 2 sizes too small one-piece with her chub out for the world to see. I'm all for body positivity and loving who you are, but seeing my mother in her too tight onesie waddling towards the pool was a sight that made 11-year-old me wish I couldn't swim. And let's just say that she was in no way elegant when entering the pool. Instead of sitting on the edge and sliding in, she went with a full-on jump into the deep end, throwing other swimmers off course in their attempts to get out of the way. And then came her entitlement, as she proceeded to act as if her $5 entry fee gave her full control over the pool and everyone in it. My mother is not a strong swimmer, so her preferred stroke of choice was doggy paddle or awkward breaststroke. This resulted in her kicking or hitting the occasional swimmer in her laps around the pool and getting angry at them for being in her way. She started yelling at the other swimmers, who were mostly kids, that they shouldn't be here and demanding they get out of the pool or get out of her way. By this point, I'd escaped to the other end of the pool, not wanting to be seen with her. Not long after Mother Dearest had gotten into the pool, she was asked to behave herself or get out of the pool. Mom, not understanding how she was the one in the wrong.
What? But I have done nothing wrong. Maybe you should teach those stupid kids to swim properly.
Of course, this fell on deaf ears, and she was told to leave. As we were leaving, with me wanting to die from embarrassment, Mom muttered something about
Never coming here again.
And even though this threat was something she rarely followed through on, thankfully for me, this time she actually meant it. Every time after this, she would drop me off or I would walk there on my own. It boggles my mind how she can be so rude and entitled to think she owns a space just by being there. But out of all the entitled experiences I've had with her throughout my life, this was one of the more milder encounters. Speaking of pools, do you like to swim or not? Please let us know.
The best part about the pool is you don't have to get out to go to the bathroom.
My girlfriend's entitled mother wants to stalk her location and her bank account. First, I'd like to say yesterday was our 1 year, and I'm leaving for basic training November 24th, so I wouldn't be there for her 18th birthday in December. My girlfriend is 17 and I'm 18. My girlfriend's mom loves to stalk all of my girlfriend's transactions and will question every one of the transactions she makes. She also loves to look at where she's at 24/7, and she's the kid that actually listens in the family. Today, I found out her mom despises me due to me going into the military and being poor. Today, my girlfriend texted me this. My mom told him not to tell me this, but Keegan, brother of my girlfriend, is nice. So basically, when she was at her friend's Senor, nickname for the brother, said they were talking bad about me the whole time. My mom said that she doesn't understand why I'm basing my whole life around you and that I do good in school, so she doesn't think I should do online college. She's wanting to do graphic arts when we move into military housing. And he said that she was complaining, saying I never want to drive anywhere like to the store to grab like one thing for them. Like, I'm sorry, but one, you never ask me to do that, and two, I actually will go drive and you just want me to because you are too lazy to do it yourself. I'd like to start off with I live in the poor class and my girlfriend lives in the wealthy class. Today, I also found out my girlfriend's mom wanted to know what I bought her for our anniversary. I know it might not sound bad, but she believes that I should have evened the money out since she spent almost $1,000 on me for our anniversary. I didn't want her to. The only reason why she did this is because recently she found out I have gone in debt 3 times to make her happy during hard times by bringing her to nice dinner places, going on expensive dates, and buying her things she's always dreamed of. So, she bought me a diffuser I've always wanted, a light alarm, and making me a custom Xbox controller. I asked my girlfriend if she wanted anything for the anniversary, and she said only a stuffed penguin, which was $20, nothing else. Her mom believes that I'm not right for her, has made my girlfriend cry millions of times because of our relationship and many, many things. It's to the point where my girlfriend wants to move out and never have communication with her side of the family ever. A little while ago, I broke down thinking very badly about myself, but it did make me question. I've never been abusive, and I haven't and will never cheat on her. Sorry I had to rant. I'm so mad and furious. Karen is allergic to chocolate and complains after ordering a brownie. Hi there! I used to lurk this sub a few years back, but never posted out of fear of any repercussions in my personal life. I worked in the food industry for 8 years, the last 4 of which I owned a small cafe that specialized in espresso and a range of cakes. However, I sold my business at the end of 2019 and have no intention of returning to the hospitality industry, so I have many a good customer service story up my sleeve. Today, a tale I will never forget. Warning, it's long. In my cafe, I tried to cater to a few different dietary needs. I supported local micro bakers and ordered several fresh batches of cakes throughout the week, including vegan options. The vegan options were a big seller for us, and we became well known in the local vegan community. Clicking onto this, I occasionally did limited time specials, and one of my first ever attempts was making a vegan salted caramel brownie monster shake. The vegan salted caramel brownies we sold had been a staple in our store. We got multiple batches a week from a lovely local vegan baker, and they always sold out. So, inspired by them, I made a big old salted caramel milkshake with vegan dairy, caramel sauce/syrup, chocolate fudge sauce, and it was topped with a whole brownie and a mountain of vegan whipped cream. When I advertised them on our social media, I had very clear and professional photos of the said shakes, and even the brownies by themselves, surrounding the milkshake glass as props. They were brownies made of chocolate. Thus, they were brown and very clearly chocolatey. In fact, you couldn't make out the salted caramel sauce that the baker drizzled on top of them unless you got close. Anyway, the shakes were a huge hit and a lot of people posted about them. End of the day, and about 4 p.m., we shut up shop like usual. This was early days when we had no staff, just myself and my partner working all day. We used to get up at 2:45 a.m. and get there at 4 a.m. and work all the way through. We were tired. I had turned off all the lights, cleaned the whole cafe, and had dragged the outdoor tables and chairs inside. The cakes that were able to last more than one day had been packed away in containers and sealed. My partner went to empty the bins and left the door just a crack open so that he could come back in without also taking out the keys. There was a very clear sign on the door saying closed with our hours below it. Our hours were also very clearly listed on all of our social media platforms and on Google. I was busy cleaning when I heard someone clear their throat. I remember jumping from shock. There was a middle-aged, scruffy-looking couple standing in the doorway, glaring daggers at me. There were tables stacked in front of them that were blocking the fridge, and the guy, in a passive-aggressive tone, says, "I can't see the products. How do you expect people to see the products?" I was overtired, in shock, and had my customer service hat still on, so I apologized and asked if he'd like to make a last-minute purchase. The woman then cut in and said,
I want the milkshake I keep seeing. The salted caramel brownie one.
I was dumbfounded. Not only was the milkshake maker entirely cleaned and off, these milkshakes had a lot of components and took a long time to make and were messy to boot. I started to say it was too late, and she cut me off, saying,
We drove an hour to be here.
I could tell these jerks were the type to trash businesses online, so I relented and agreed, but said it had to be takeaway due to the cleanup. They complained again, and I relented again. I started to make the milkshake, and the man starts to snap at me that I haven't asked him what he's having, and he'd like to sit down. My partner has returned at this point, is confused and inwardly upset, and says he'll take the man's order. The guy then moans that he still can't see the cakes. At this point, I snapped that of course we put the cakes away when we're closed, to keep them good. He then stares at me, shocked, and repeats, "Closed?" This guy genuinely tried to claim that despite the lights being out, the shop being dark, the tables and chairs literally stacked in front of him, the food packed away, and the closed sign on the door, that he somehow hadn't noticed we were closed. I went back to making the milkshake, flabbergasted. I did my best and made a darn beautiful milkshake, despite how awful these people were. My partner dragged out an outdoor table and chair set for them because they also demanded to sit outside instead of inside the stuffy shop. When I finally finish my culinary art, I carry out her milkshake and his cake. I place it in front of her with a smile and say, "Ta-da!" as I'm used to people's faces lighting up and wows when they see this sugar-filled monstrosity. Her face immediately messes up and she snaps.
What is this?
Me, "The salted caramel brownie milkshake you ordered." Her,
No, what is that?
she gestured specifically at the brownie on top. Me, "That's the salted caramel brownie." Her,
It's clearly chocolate.
me, "Yes, it is a brownie. They are made of chocolate."
I am allergic to chocolate. This is ridiculous.
Me, annoyed at this point. "Then why did you order a brownie milkshake?" Her,
You said it was salted caramel brownie.
me, "It is. It's a brownie with a salted caramel drizzle. I thought you saw the picture."
I did, and I saw the title, which clearly said salted caramel brownie.
Me, "Yes, it did." I started to walk away. I was done. Then I hear her husband say,
This is ridiculous. False advertising.
she pitches in, and
I know. I can't even have this.
I stopped and turned back, about to try and calm them down, and the man looks me dead in the eye and says,
Go away. We're talking.
I went back inside, into the back office area, and I cried. My partner asked what happened, and I explained. He was as annoyed as I was and kindly cleaned up the whole milkshake area and ingredients for me while I sat in the back and tried to breathe it out. To this day, this memory grates on me. Speaking of salted caramel brownie milkshake, oh man, that sounds so good.
You're going to make me one after this, Mr. Reddit, or I'm going to speak to your manager.
Sick kid at the self-checkout. Cast. We've got me, we've got the good mom, we've got the sick kid, and the rich man. About 14 years ago now, I was working at my local Walmart, put in charge of watching the self-checkout on a slow day. I will admit that back then I was inexperienced with people and lazy, but my few months there had taught me a lot about how nasty folks can get. Good mom comes rushing to the self-checkout with sick kid in her cart. He does not look well, and I hear him saying as they come up,
I don't feel good, Mom. I want to go home.
Good mom clearly understands that her kid has become sicker since they came in and is trying to rush to get him home now. She's trying to soothe him while simultaneously fumbling her groceries and bare essentials like soup and boxes of tissues.
I know, sweetie. I'm sorry. Mommy is going as fast as she can.
Well, along comes rich man. He has on what has to be the most expensive jacket I have ever seen. Full business, gold watch, tie, pricey shoes, perfect haircut, fit, carrying a lot of coffee. Everything about him makes me glad this is self-checkout because my track record with rich folk treating me bad here is almost 100%. He begins checking out directly across from good mom and sick kid, his back facing them. Suddenly, sick kid starts to squirm and look around wildly.
Mom, I need the restroom.
Good mom looks up from the checkout and sees sick kid is not going to make it through her checkout. She practically flies around the cart, picks him up, and he projectile vomits across the self-checkout all over rich man's expensive jacket. My jaw drops. It can't be real. As I begin to react, I'm also watching rich man. He drops his coffee and is stunned for a moment when something I was not ready for happens. He turns around, quickly removing the jacket, dumps it on the floor, and walks quickly over to good mom and sick kid, kneeling because they are now on the ground. Good mom comforting her crying kid with her eyes practically begging for mercy at this point. Rich man, is he okay? I walk up with towels already on the radio for cleanup and hand him one. He uses it to help clean up good mom. Good mom, he might have the stomach flu. I just needed to pick up some things to take care of him. I'm so sorry. Rich man, it's okay. Let's get him cleaned up. Good mom seems to finally really see the man and how he's dressed for the first time and what happened to him.
Oh my God, do you work here?
Rich man, wiping vomit off her back while I start on the floor. No ma'am, just a dad myself. Hate to see a kid not feeling well. Good mom was so embarrassed that she didn't really speak again other than a meager thank you as we finished cleaning up and rich man helped her finish checking out personally. I helped him put his certainly ruined jacket in a garbage bag to take home and he checked out as well. I asked him if there was anything else I could do for him and rich man politely declined and left the store. I will never forget how that man reacted that day. For all his obvious wealth, he was his last priority at that moment, even as a victim himself. He didn't complain about the mess or that he might get the kid's flu or his ruined jacket, nothing. And he certainly did more to help than me, the actual employee. I took this lesson to heart for all future interactions with people, and it has made a tremendous difference as I became a father myself. Thanks for reading. Edit. I posted this in the morning after I started seeing these stories, mostly about terrible folks of course, on YouTube, thinking that not all of these are a negative thing, and the world is in a tough enough place as it is right now. I remember this story very well and decided to share. Since I posted from my phone, I came back to correct any mistakes I had made, like typos and grammar. I'm so extremely happy to see this has made a positive impact on so many people. I could not have imagined so many upvotes and views. More than anything, seeing comments about those who have had an emotional reaction to this brings tears to my eyes in the best way possible. It has sincerely made me feel better in these tough times for my kids' future. Thank you all. Oh, Karen, what's wrong?
That story is so sweet.
Am I the jerk for immediately walking out of the restaurant when I saw my husband's family present for our wedding anniversary? This happened last week, and I'm getting scolded for what I did by everyone. Last week was mine, 26 female, and my dear husband, 29 male, wedding anniversary. His mommy started calling asking about our plans for this year's anniversary. We've been married for 3 years, by the way. My husband told her that we were going to go out and celebrate and have dinner together. She asked if she could host the anniversary at her house instead and invite family members. It was an instant no from me. My husband seemed to be wanting it, but I already made other plans. She had us celebrate with her while we were together on a vacation for 2 weeks. That was horrific and the worst experience so far. I knew my husband was still talking to her about it, but I just let them. 2 days before the anniversary, he asked if we could have a family celebration but still go to the restaurant and have a good time. I felt uncomfortable. All I wanted was for some time together, alone. Plus, I had other plans after dinner, and to have the family come is not logical at this point. I was working that day till 3 p.m. He didn't go to work. He was busy all morning and didn't want to say with what, so I figured he's getting me a present or something. He picked me up at 3 p.m. I remember his mom constantly calling while we were in the car. I got home, took a shower, made sure he checked with the restaurant about reservations for the night, and we left at 7 p.m. Again, his mom was talking to him on the phone in the car. I asked him why she was calling all day, and he changed the subject. We arrived at the restaurant. He walked in before me. I followed him, and after I walked through the door, I saw his mom, dad, sister, and cousin and her kids. I froze for a second. My heart dropped. I felt so much rage as he tried to get me to keep walking. His family saw me when I turned around and walked out and back to the car. He followed me and started saying sorry, but I should just go inside with him since it was already done. I yelled at him, literally just losing it, and telling him that he ruined the night I was waiting for and how he turned it into a family dinner, to which I said no from the beginning. He begged me to go inside, but I refused. We argued till his mom came trying to convince me to go in. I went home in a taxi after I told them to go back and celebrate. He came home not liking that I left and refused to talk about it. His mom texted me about my behavior and how I ruined it for her son and the whole family, and that I should respect her family and stop whining and overreacting like that. Edit to answer some questions. We're in Europe, / this is our 3rd anniversary. The past anniversary was celebrated with his family, / this isn't the first time. I've experienced the same thing on other occasions. Mother-in-law gets more aggressive on Christmas. She keeps stomping on boundaries, and dear husband has no problem with that. Number 1 answer. So much to unpack here. 1. He's allowing his mother to be the second spouse in his life. It's not normal for a couple to spend their wedding anniversaries with extended family. I'm from the US, so I recognize that this may be cultural. Frankly, it's weird that his mom wants to push so hard to spend your anniversary with you. Like Freudian level weird. 2. Your husband knew you were adamantly against this whole thing, and he not only didn't tell his mom no, he arranged for her and the rest of the family to have dinner that you did not want to have. That's so beyond disrespectful and dismissive of your feelings. 3. Your husband needs to get it through his head that when he married you, you became his primary family. You and any kids you have, if you so choose, are his number 1. His mommy is in second place. She's clawing to maintain that top spot, and he is letting her. He gave his mother priority on your wedding anniversary. I mean, that's just beyond the pale. All in all, not the jerk. Set those boundaries, and every single time he or his mother crosses them, leave. Ignore her texts, block her number, whatever. You need to tell your husband that you will be handling all future couple-related things in-house, and his mother is no longer a factor in the plans you two make. Well, who do you agree with? OP or her husband? Please let us know.
I dare you to choose your mummy over me, Mr. Reddit.
Entitled mom tries to turn in invalid coupons and tries to steal my box of Girl Scout cookies. Backstory. I went to the store that was walking distance to get some basics for breakfast that morning, eggs and milk and so on. However, I also had some extra money for a box or 2 of Girl Scout cookies, as it was the season. So after I got the basics, I went and got myself a good old box of Thin Mints. Enter Entitled Kid and Entitled Mom. Entitled Kid was a skinny lad of about average 7 years old height. Entitled Kid.
Mommy, I want cookies.
Entitled Mom then proceeds to sigh and assures the little jerk that they will get them after they shop. The cashier proceeds to ring me up as soon as Entitled Mom and her kid get in line. The mom is clearly annoyed that it's taking so long. Once I'm done, I foolishly stick around because I have a feeling crap's gonna go down. She proceeds to almost yeet her items at the poor guy while on the phone, and the kid is having a seizure and every other minute screaming, "Cookies!" Cashier. That'll be Entitled Mom.
I have coupons.
Literally, anyone in the vicinity turned and looked at her with an annoyed look. Cashier. Oh, okay. That'll be something close to $100. Entitled Mom pulls out a wad of cash and a small stack of coupons. She shoves the coupons in the guy's face and pulls out 1 or 2 bills from the wad of cash. Cashier then sorted out all the coupons, but then this is where crap hits the fan. Cashier: ma'am, some of these aren't valid.
No. I checked all of these. They're all good. So just hurry up.
No. Some of these are almost a year overdue.
Oh my god. Stop lying and wasting my time and get on with it.
Cashier then shows her the dates and she gets all flustered. Before she can rant, cashier says, "Either you pay for it all, pay for what you can, or get out." Entitled Mom huffs and puffs, but then pulls out a $40 bottle of wine and some small items. She starts a mini rant about selfishness and single mothers and whatnot. I didn't stick around in fear of being roped in. I had what I wanted, my groceries, a Reddit story, and about to get some cookies. I try to get out as fast as I can, grab my cookies, and yeet on out of there. I buy my box, but they have caught up. Entitled Kid: "I want green boxes." Entitled Mom:
Well, hurry up then.
Girl Scout and Girl Scout's mom were both startled by the rude behavior, and the little one was starting to tear up. The mother was about to slap the Karen, but kept her composure. Girl Scout's mom: "Please leave my daughter alone and be patient, please. She's only about 7. Entitled Mom scoffs:
Whatever. Hurry up.
Girl Scout's mom, master of self-control: "Okay, that'll be this much." Entitled Mom spluttering:
What? That's so expensive.
2 things. 1, Karen, where the money wad at? And 2, it was like $10 plus tax. Girl Scout's mom: "Well, that's the price, so please leave if you cannot pay." Entitled Mom sniffs:
Come on, son. We're going home without your treat because these 2 jerks can't give a bit of charity to a single mother.
Upon hearing that he was being denied his cookies, Entitled Kid started throwing a Category 5 tantrum on the ground, causing Girl Scout to cry, as any reasonable kid would do when being screamed at. Girl Scout's mom hugged her daughter as the little Entitled Kid continued to cry and wail. Entitled Mom did nothing, rather letting her kid cry while giving a dirty look to the Girl Scout and her mother. I decided that it was my time to vamoose before nope, too late. Entitled Mom spots me looking and then sees my boxes.
Hey, you.
Me, internally. Oh no. Externally. Who? Me? Entitled Mom:
Obviously. Can you possibly spare some cookies for my precious angel?
Entitled Kid immediately stops wailing and runs up to me with a big old smile filled with cavity crowns. I mean, what could I say to that poor struggling single mother and her sweet kid? So, as any reasonable person would do, I simply reply, "No, sorry," and turn to leave. Entitled Kid resumes his tantrum, and Entitled Mom then grabs me on the shoulder.
What the heck did you say to me, you little jerk? How dare you say no to me? I am a single mother and an elder, so you have to do what I say.
Me: "Ma'am, 3 things. 1, I don't have to listen to you. 2, I don't owe you anything. And 3, you have about 10 seconds to let me go.
Or what?
Or that nice security guard will be forced to restrain you and possibly call the police for harassment."
Well, who do you think they're gonna believe? Some bratty kid and a rent-a-cop?
Me: "Well, what about this fine mother and her daughter?" We then see Girl Scout's mother recording the incident and Girl Scout behind her. Entitled Mom starts to realize what deep trouble she's in and attempts to backtrack when security guard walks in. Security guard: "Ma'am, is there a problem?" Entitled Mom:
Yes, this little jerk stole my cookies and...
Security guard: "Ma'am, this rent-a-cop already heard everything, so I suggest you leave now." Entitled Mom then splutters and tries to defend herself, but security guard wasn't having any of that and escorted her off the property, informing her that she was now banned from the store. Before I left, Girl Scout's mom stopped me. Girl Scout's mom: "Hey, thanks for dealing with that. Well, you know." Me: "No problem. I'm sorry you guys had to deal with that." Girl Scout's mom: "Here, why don't you take another box on the house?" Girl Scout: "Thank you." Speaking of Girl Scout cookies, what's your favorite flavor Girl Scout cookies of all time? Please let us know.
You'll never make me choose just one.
Am I the jerk for refusing to take the blame for my roommate losing her job? I, 21 female, have been friends with my roommate, 22 female, since kindergarten. Our whole lives she's been bad at borrowing things, not giving a borrowed item back for weeks or months, and sometimes forever. But she's an incredible person otherwise, and I love her. This event may change things though. Her laptop charger stopped working on Saturday and she asked if she could borrow mine. I said yes, as long as she 1. Didn't take it out of the house, 2. Gave it back to me on Tuesday as I had a very important meeting at 9 a.m. and would need to plug my laptop in for as it would be hours long. 3. Gave it back to me on Sunday, the 18th, as I will be going home to my mom's house for the week. She said no problem. She planned on going to buy a new one on Monday anyway and wouldn't need it that long, and she began using my charger. I texted her yesterday morning to remind her I needed my charger for my 9 a.m. the next day, today, and because I'd be home from work around 1 a.m., I asked her if she'd leave it on the kitchen table or in my bedroom. I got home around 1:30 a.m. and the charger wasn't anywhere in the house. I checked my laptop to see if I could do the meeting without the charger, but it was at 20%. So I went into her room, unplugged her laptop, and took my charger back. Today around 1 p.m. I heard her wake up. She started freaking out. Apparently she had lost her phone and was using her laptop as her alarm. She was supposed to open at her job at 6:30 a.m. She asked if she could borrow my phone and called her boss, and she left for work. She arrived back home at 3, basically weeping. She had been written up 3 times before this, and because of this, she lost her job. She started going off on me about how messed up it was that I took the charger. She thinks I should have reminded her in the evening to leave my charger out or woken her up before taking my charger back to ask if I could have it so she could set up a different alarm, or asked me to wake her up. She asked me to call her boss and explain that it was my fault she was late. I refused. I said it was her fault she lost her phone. Her fault she didn't charge her computer that day when I texted her in the morning to remind her I needed my charger back. Her fault she had already been written up 3 times. She refuses to speak to me now, and our mutual friends say one of 3 things. I should have known better to let her borrow something because I know how she can be. I should have woken her up and asked for it back, or at least called her boss to explain. But I just cannot agree with any of them that this is my fault. Is it my fault she lost her job? Am I the jerk? Update. 1. My refusal to call her boss was out of frustration with her and my friends. I was feeling attacked, so I was refusing to help because I felt like they weren't seeing my side. Why should I lie for her? It was also extremely out of character. I love lying to authority to make things better. Haha, who doesn't? 2. She is not lazy. People who are so ready to judge are a huge bummer. This was her 9th day of working in a row. The majority of those shifts were 9+ hours, something I didn't mention but didn't feel like it was necessary. If someone sleeps for 12 hours, it's usually because they need it. Usually, people who work shift work have a messed up circadian rhythm. I work until 1 a.m. sometimes and have to be in for 11 a.m. the same morning. Then I'll be off for 3 days. Then I'll work different shifts. It changes constantly. Same with her. We don't have a sleep schedule. We sleep when we can and both work the rest of the time. 3. She's apologized for blaming me and knows she should have bought a charger yesterday and should have told me she lost her phone but was too embarrassed and thought she'd solve the problem. She didn't think I'd take the charger when I got home but can understand why I did, being afraid she wouldn't give it back in time as she never really does. But she does still think I should have woken her up when I took it. Maybe she's right, I don't know. She knows if I call her boss and say the truth that her boss will just say, well, she should have told you she lost her phone and she should have replaced the charger. 5. She's been at this job for 7 years. She's been in the wedding of a coworker and we both babysat for her boss when we were in high school, which is why this blew up so much and why she and all my friends were so quick to blame me. Her job is super important to her, which is why we've decided this. No, I'm not her mother, but we've been best friends for almost 16 years, so it's a little more than just a crappy roommate situation. When I said she's a lovely person otherwise, I meant that. Thanks for the input, it helped with such a quick turnaround.
Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.